Chapter 65. In August, because of the typhoon, there were a few heavy rains, and the weather was finally not so hot. The typhoon had just passed. Taking advantage of the fact that there were still a few clouds floating in the sky and the summer heat hadn't recovered, Song Jiwen ran over to Poplar Fruit and wanted to organize a hiking trip. Poplar Fruit, who stayed at home in front of the computer all day, felt that he was going to go crazy from staying at home, so he immediately agreed. However, it was better to have fun together than to have fun alone. Moreover, if only Poplar Fruit went alone, he would become a third wheel between Song Jiwen and Kitten. Therefore, Poplar Fruit also called Duan Shueching. Early on Saturday morning, Song Jiwen drove the car, took Poplar Fruit and Kiki to the market to buy some things, and then picked up Duan Shueching and Kitten. The five of them drove to Baiyun Mountain. At the foot of Baiyun Mountain, Song Jiwen bought the tickets and drove the car to the parking lot. Since they were here to hike, there was no need to drive up. After getting out of the car, Poplar Fruit took the biggest backpack from Song Jiwen's hand and carried it. The others also carried a backpack. Song Jiwen's neck also hung a big SLR camera. Duan Shueching walked beside Poplar Fruit and looked at the backpack that was as big as a hiking backpack. She asked with some concern, "Brother Yang, is this heavy? Do you want to put some in my bag? I don't have many things." "It's okay. He is strong now." Song Jiwen smiled and walked past them with Kitten. Poplar Fruit held Kiki in front of his chest with a strap. She just woke up and looked at the unfamiliar environment in a daze. Her head leaned on her father's chest and felt the heartbeat that made her feel safe. Poplar Fruit smiled and weighed the backpack on his back. He said to Duan Shueching, "It's okay. It's not that heavy. Let's go." With Song Jiwen leading the way, they slowly climbed up the stone steps on the left side of the driveway. The sky was a little gloomy today, but there was no sign of rain. This kind of weather was perfect for traveling. As they climbed up the mountain path, a gentle breeze caressed them. The lush trees on the mountain swayed with the wind, as if welcoming their arrival. Last night, a heavy rain seemed to have fallen on Mount Baiyun. Looking from afar, one could only see clouds and mist lingering around the mountain. It was as if one had arrived at the abode of an immortal. Climbing the mountain would definitely be a very tiring thing if one just kept climbing. Poplar Fruit and the others didn't come just for exercise. So every time they arrived at a new scenic spot, Song Jiwen would ask everyone to come and take photos. Other than taking photos together, most of the time, Poplar Fruit would help him and Kitten take photos. Because Poplar Fruit was carrying Kiki and many bags, it was a little inconvenient. Duan Shueching was introverted and wouldn't jump around like Kitten. Whenever she saw something new, she would ask Song Jiwen to help her take photos. Of course, Song Jiwen would also have a smirk on his face. He would push Poplar Fruit and Duan Shueching together and let the two of them stand together to take photos. Kiki was very excited about taking photos. Every time the camera pointed at her, the corners of her mouth would curl up happily. However, Poplar Fruit and Duan Shueching weren't so natural. Especially when Song Jiwen asked the two of them to pose very intimately, Poplar Fruit was completely stiff. Although Kitten laughed and jumped around to add fuel to the fire, Poplar Fruit just leaned against Duan Shueching for the photo. He wouldn't go any further. After a few rounds, Duan Shueching and Kitten's cheeks were red. However, Kitten's cheeks were red because she was too excited and tired from jumping around. Duan Shueching's cheeks were red because she was shy and couldn't stand it. She looked at Poplar Fruit and didn't dare to look directly into his eyes. Taking photos was only a small interlude throughout the entire journey. Poplar Fruit and the others didn't stop walking and kept walking forward. When they arrived at the Pu Valley, they crossed the rippling lotus pond from the small bridge. From afar, they could see one of the 8 ancient sceneries of Yangcheng, Pu Jian Lian Quan. The mountain stream gurgled and flowed slowly down the valley's steep rocks. Some tourists couldn't help but take off their shoes and jump in. The water only reached up to their ankles. However, now wasn't the best time to play in the water. If it was during a hot day, the clear and cool mountain spring would definitely attract more people to go into the water to cool off. Even so, the intertwined trees in the mountains were like a canopy, covering this place like a paradise. There was also sunlight that shone through the thin gaps. Everywhere it went, there were clusters of flowers, and among the dense greenery there were a few spots of pink. Only then did it not appear too cold and monotonous. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, it couldn't slow down the pace of Poplar Fruit and the others. After taking a few photos, they continued to walk forward. They hadn't gone far from the Pu Valley when Poplar Fruit and the others saw an old temple. The small archway entered their eyes first. From right to left, the words Buddhist Realm were written on it. On the back, the words Repent and Be Saved were written. This is Nungren Temple, Song Jiwen introduced. However, there are no monks here anymore. Like the other scenic spots of Mount Bayun, almost all the buildings here were rebuilt after the liberation. During the anti-Japanese war, the Japanese invaded Yangcheng and the cultural relics on Mount Bayun were destroyed along with the hills and trees. After the reconstruction, there were no monks who continued to cultivate here. However, this was also good. Without the smell of incense, the air of Mount Bayun, which was known as the lung of the city, was better protected. Therefore, instead of calling the temple a Buddhist treasureland, it was better to call it a historical site that had witnessed history. In the courtyard of the temple, there was a large dark red stone that was constantly being washed by the fountain. The stone was called Dream of the Century. Looking at the introduction, it was transported from the Three Gorges. This made Poplar Fruit a little speechless. It was a large stone that weighed dozens of tons. The kitten pulled Duan Shueching over to take photos intimately. Kiki was also very interested in the big stone and squeaked. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to go over and let her pat the big stone with her small hand. After so many years of washing, the big stone had no dust on it. When Kiki patted it, it was slippery. Although it was clean, her hand was still wet. Poplar Fruit had to take out a tissue to wipe her hand. Poplar Fruit preferred the dragon carvings on the eaves of the temple. The dragon carvings were different from each other, but they were all in the shape of bearing fangs and brandishing claws. The carvings were lifelike. After the baptism of time, the dragon carvings were a little damaged. The color was also stained by rain and moss. After passing Nungren Temple, the mountain road became steep. Poplar Fruit and the others climbed to the next scenic spot. After passing by the Tiannan First Peak, Poplar Fruit and the others came to the square on the top of the mountain. In the square surrounded by heavy guardrails, the kitten, who was walking in front of Song Jiwen, suddenly shouted. Poplar Fruit and the others looked in the direction the kitten was pointing. Only then did they understand why she was so excited. At this time, Poplar Fruit and the others were already on the top of the mountain. As far as the eye could see, the surrounding mountains were shrouded in amiable fog. Just now, when they looked at the mountain from below, they felt that the mountain was like an immortal's cave. Now, they felt as if they were in an immortal's cave. Looking outside, they felt as if they were riding on clouds and mist. White clouds above Bayun Mountain, white clouds below Bayun Mountain. Didn't the beautiful scenery in front of them at this moment correspond to this poem? This place was also called White Clouds Looking at the Evening, and it really lived up to its name. Looking into the distance, they could see the whole city of Yangcheng. Looking at the faintly visible tall buildings through the fog from afar, it was like looking at a mirage. It was hard to tell whether it was real or fake. There was a rattan chair next to the guardrails. Song Jiwen put the camera in Poplar Fruit's hand and asked him to take photos for him. Song Jiwen swaggered like an evil advisor in ancient times. He sat inside with his legs spread apart, but his wrist was supporting his chin. He deliberately put on a cool expression on his face. The kitten was laughing beside him, which made Song Jiwen angry. The evil advisor sat in the rattan chair and shouted loudly. He forced the ignorant girl into his arms and ravaged her fiercely. As a frontline reporter, Poplar Fruit could not let this evil person succeed. He faithfully recorded all of this with the camera. In the future, he could give it to the kitten to settle accounts with him. After taking a few photos with each other, Song Jiwen said, "Let's go down." "Ah! We worked so hard to climb up, why are we going down again?" the kitten said with a bitter face. Song Jiwen explained, "If we go down, we will reach the Spring Valley. If you don't go, you will definitely regret it because there are a lot of birds in there." "Wow! Really? Let's go, let's go. The kitten pulled Song Jiwen with a face full of surprise and rushed down first. Poplar Fruit shook his head and looked at Duan Xueqing with a bitter smile. The two of them followed behind from a distance. Seeing the sweat on Duan Xueqing's forehead, Poplar Fruit considerately asked, "Xueqing, is this heavy? Let me help you carry it." Duan Xueqing looked at Poplar Fruit's sparkling eyes, lowered her head a little shyly, and said softly, "No need, I can do it." Duan Xueqing and Poplar Fruit walked side by side, and the passers-by on the road all looked at them. It couldn't be helped. The man was tall and handsome, the woman was beautiful and outstanding, and they even brought along a beautifully dressed cute baby. It was like a big celebrity family going on a trip, making the passers-by envious. "Come over quickly." From afar, the kitten waved at them. Looking at her excited expression, it was as if she had discovered a new continent. Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing smiled slightly, and the two of them quickly walked up. So many birds. As they got closer, even the usually calm Duan Xueqing could not help but exclaim softly. There were indeed a lot of birds. There were many bird houses built along the road. Some of the houses had nests in the trees, and some didn't even have a nest. "This is a peacock," the kitten called. Everyone followed her line of sight. A peacock with a long tail was leisurely jumping from the ground to a branch half a meter high. It proudly turned its head, and disdained to pay attention to Poplar Fruit and the others. The kitten went up and looked for a long time, then ran back in frustration and said, it doesn't even spread its tail. I'm so anxious." Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted her. Peacocks usually spread their tails in spring. It's very rare for us to see one at this time. However, there were all kinds of birds in the garden, and peacocks were not the only attractive ones. The kitten's attention was quickly diverted. "Everyone, come and see," Song Jiwen suddenly shouted. Poplar Fruit and the others all gathered around. "Look, there are big roosters here." Looking carefully, there were 3 big roosters. 2 of them had pure white feathers, but the coxcombs were red like fire. One of them had a chest, abdomen, and tail feathers that were pure black and shiny, but the neck was white and brown. Poplar Fruit, who came from the countryside, recognized the 3 roosters. He said, "These chickens are called Yuan Bao chickens. Look at them, their tails are up and inward, and their necks are high. Don't they look like Yuan Bao?" The kitten nodded vigorously and listened very carefully. "Let's look at the next one. I heard that there are red-crowned cranes." "Let's look for them," Poplar Fruit said. He had just glanced at the introduction at the entrance of Mingchun Valley. It said, "There are more than 150 species of birds in the garden, including red-crowned cranes, swans, peacocks, yellow-bellied tragopan, blue pheasants, and more than 5,000 birds." Now they had seen the peacocks, but not the red-crowned cranes. Chapter 66. As they walked past a small cage, Poplar Fruit and the others suddenly heard a strange voice. "Hello." Who was greeting them? They turned around to look for the voice, but there was no one around them. "Hello." Just as Poplar Fruit and the others were in shock, the strange voice sounded again. This time, Poplar Fruit found out that it was a black myna in the cage next to them that was talking to them. Seeing the myna stretching its head and looking at them, Kiki became very happy for some reason. She wriggled in Poplar Fruit's arms excitedly, clapping her little hands and squealing loudly. Her crisp voice covered the sporadic chirping of the birds in the park. At this moment, a shocking scene occurred. With Kiki's cheerful voice, the sleepy birds in the park all became excited. They flapped their wings and flew to the corner closest to Kiki. The whole Mingchun Valley was drowned in the singing of all kinds of birds. If there were no cages to separate them, they would probably have flown directly to them. "The peacock is spreading its tail," the sharp-eyed kitten shouted, pointing at the peacock that had made her go back in vain. Poplar Fruit looked over. Indeed, the proud peacock was facing them. The feathers on its back were like a folding fan that was slowly spreading out, reflecting the sunlight. It looked very beautiful. Song Jiwen quickly took out his SLR camera and took pictures. The myna next to him did not forget to grab a few shots. It also jumped to the side of the cage, holding the iron wire firmly with its 2 claws, and shouted, "Hello. I love you." Its strange pronunciation made Poplar Fruit and the others laugh. In their happiness, they forgot that all the commotion was caused by Kiki's cry. When the other tourists saw this rare scene of hundreds of birds paying homage, they all raised their cameras and quickly took pictures of these rare birds while they were showing their most beautiful side. They did not have time to trace the source of the incident. There was also a white parrot dancing excitedly in the cage, trying to attract Kiki's attention. However, after Kiki called out once, she sat quietly on her father's chest and continued to look around. She did not continue to cause a ruckus, so the commotion of the birds gradually subsided. Even the peacock with its tail spread out, after the poplar fruit and the others had walked far away, retracted its beautiful tail feathers and hid behind the bushes. The tourists who came up later heard the tourists in front of them talking excitedly about what had just happened. They realized that they had missed such a spectacular scene because they had been lazy on the road. They were full of regret. They beat their chests and stamped their feet, sighing. As they walked down, Poplar Fruit and the others finally saw the red-crowned crane that they had been looking for a long time. These red-crowned cranes seemed to have taken good care of themselves. Their feathers were glossy and glossy. Apart from their throats, necks, tails, and legs which were black and their heads were vermilion red, the rest of their feathers were flawless white. Looking at them walking leisurely in the cage, their postures were simply too elegant. Seeing the tourists coming over, the red-crowned cranes slowly walked over. They looked at Poplar Fruit and the others with gentle eyes. Kitten walked forward, and a red-crowned crane came up to her. It tilted its head and looked at her. In fact, the red-crowned crane wanted her to feed it. This made Kitten very happy. She quickly asked Song Jiwen to take a picture of it for her. Seeing such beautiful creatures, Poplar Fruit could not hold back. He walked forward, squatted down, and greeted the red-crowned cranes with a smile. Kiki saw it and was very happy. She stretched out her hand to get close to the cage, but she could not reach it. She turned back and patted her father's chest gently. "No, you can't touch it. What if it pecks you?" Poplar Fruit gently persuaded Kiki, but Kiki did not care. Seeing that her father was not willing to move, she hummed softly in dissatisfaction. At this time, Poplar Fruit saw that the biggest and most beautiful red-crowned crane came over. It bent its head and retracted its long beak into the cage. However, its round head stretched out, and its red top gently rubbed against the net of the cage. Did it want people to touch it? Poplar Fruit felt that it was a little unbelievable. He had never seen such a considerate red-crowned crane, even in the books. Of course, except in Xianxia novels. Kiki was impatiently rubbing against Poplar Fruit's chest. At this time, her beautiful big eyes were floating with mist. It seemed that if her father did not agree, she would immediately cry in front of him. Poplar Fruit had to slowly bend over with his right hand in front of him, in case the red-crowned crane had any excessive reaction and hurt Kiki. However, he quickly realized that his worries were unnecessary. The red-crowned crane was very quiet. Kiki's small hand gently stroked the red-crowned crane's head, like an elder comforting a junior. Not only was the red-crowned crane not displeased, it even squinted its brown eyes in enjoyment. Kiki was very happy. After retracting her hand, she even patted her father's right hand and giggled. Just as he straightened his back, Poplar Fruit found that the red-crowned cranes in the cage were not calm anymore. Under the lead of the biggest and most beautiful red-crowned crane, they were running and jumping in the not-so-big cage. They jumped in the air, spread their wings, stretched their backs, and raised their heads. The leading red-crowned crane pointed its beak upwards, raised its head to the sky, and spread its wings. Ho! Ho! Song, and the other red-crowned cranes echoed it loudly. They called out to each other, or bent their backs and jumped, or raised their heads and kicked, or spread their wings and walked, or bent their backs and bowed. They danced beautifully, making people feel relaxed and happy. They wished they could grow a pair of wings and join them. This was the crane dance. Poplar Fruit watched for a long time before he was surprised. He had only seen this scene on CCTV's Animal World. Now, he could actually see it with his own eyes in front of such a small cage. It was really rare. Not only Poplar Fruit, but Song Jiwen, Kitten, and Duan Xueqing were also stunned. It was not until the crane dance gradually stopped that they recovered from such a beautiful dance. Poplar Fruit turned to Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, did you get a picture?" Song Jiwen shook the DSLR in his hand in annoyance and said, "No, I just wanted to see it and forgot to take a picture." "What a pity," Kitten sighed. Du and Xueqing also nodded in agreement. "It's okay," Poplar Fruit comforted them. "Being able to see it once means that we have no regrets on this trip. Don't ask for too much. Indeed, such a scene should only exist in heaven. How many times could one see it in the human world? To be able to see such a beautiful scene up close and leave it deeply in one's memory was already the best gift from heaven." After seeing the crane dance, only a bare mountain wall and the dripping rock with flowing water could not attract Poplar Fruit and the others to stop and watch. They followed the original route and climbed towards Nine Dragon Spring. After climbing for a long time, the sun was already close to noon. The girls were all sweating profusely and were exhausted. "We're almost at Nine Dragon Spring. Let's take a break there," Song Jiwen suggested. Poplar Fruit was still very energetic, but seeing the girls' expressions, he nodded and agreed to Song Jiwen's suggestion. When they arrived at Nine Dragon Spring, Poplar Fruit and the others found a shady place. They took out a plastic carpet from Poplar Fruit's backpack and laid it under the shade of a tree. Then, everyone sat on it and ate the lunch they bought in the morning. Because they were too tired, the girls only ate a few mouthfuls of food before putting it down. As expected, Poplar Fruit smiled and took out a few clean big red apples and a can of fruit from his backpack. Kitten said in surprise, "Wow, is your backpack Tinkerbell's pocket? Is there anything good in it? Hurry up and take it out." Everyone laughed heartily. Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to eat. Instead, he took out a thermos and a milk bottle from his backpack. He used hot water to make a bottle of milk for Kiki to drink. After playing with Kiki for the whole morning, she was also tired. After drinking the milk, she fell asleep. After eating, everyone took the opportunity to rest. The energetic Poplar Fruit had nothing to do. He held Song Jiwen's DSLR and walked around. As he walked, he arrived at Yang Cheng's Steely Forest. Yang Cheng's Steely Forest had a collection of famous people and literati praising Lingnan, Yang Cheng, and Baiyun Mountain. The black marble stele was quietly erected on the side of the mountain road. It was hidden in the dense green leaves. Poplar Fruit carefully looked at the words on it. Each stele's handwriting was different. However, the handwriting was either vigorous or elegant. Even Poplar Fruit, who did not understand calligraphy, felt that it was very beautiful. Perhaps, it was time to practice calligraphy in the future, Poplar Fruit thought to himself. He typed on the computer every day, but his own handwriting was a bit ugly. Now that he looked at the famous works, Poplar Fruit was extremely envious. When Poplar Fruit leisurely walked back, the group was ready to set off again. There was a saying in Yangcheng, "If you don't reach Baiyun Mountain, you can't be considered to have come to Yangcheng. If you don't go to Moxing Ridge, you can't be considered to have climbed Baiyun Mountain." Under Song Jiwen's provocation, the girls gritted their teeth and began to climb again. This time, Poplar Fruit did not let Du and Xueqing continue to carry her backpack. He held Du and Xueqing's backpack in his hand. This bit of weight was nothing to Poplar Fruit. It would be easier for her to climb the mountain if she carried light. Du and Xueqing accompanied Poplar Fruit as they climbed step by step. Although they did not lean on each other like a couple, Du and Xueqing felt sweet in her heart. Xiao Mao's backpack was also given to Song Jiwen. However, halfway up, Song Jiwen could not carry it anymore. In the end, it was given to Poplar Fruit. Even so, after climbing the mountain, everyone was almost paralyzed from exhaustion. However, Poplar Fruit, who was carrying bags of various sizes, was still full of energy. Du and Xueqing leaned against the stone railing, panting. Her bangs on her forehead were wet with sweat and stuck messily to her head. Suddenly, she saw a large hand in front of her, holding a bottle of mineral water. She looked up and saw Poplar Fruit looking at her with a smile. He said, "Drink some water. You look exhausted." "Okay." Du and Xueqing lowered her head slightly and took the water. Her cheeks suddenly turned bright red. She did not know if it was because she was tired from climbing the mountain or something else, but she looked very beautiful. However, Poplar Fruit did not notice. He had already turned around and handed the water to Song Jiwen and Xiao Mao. In the afternoon, they climbed the mountain for more than an hour. Then, everyone rested at the top of the mountain, took photos, and played for almost an hour. When they went down the mountain, they walked to the place where the cable car was. Everyone did not want to go down anymore, so they bought tickets and took the cable car down the mountain. Looking down at the pedestrians along the way from high up in the sky, Poplar Fruit suddenly realized that he had seen so many beautiful scenery today. The experience of traveling was really wonderful. It was better to travel 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. This was probably the feeling of traveling 10,000 miles. Poplar Fruit thought of his dream of becoming a gourmet traveler. If he traveled around the world, he might see more wonderful things. Chapter 67. Poplar Fruit had to wait for the translation manuscript from the Yin-Yang Web. He postponed his original plan of returning to his hometown in August. Yang Guo thought to herself. But she did not expect the test translation to not be sent over yet. The reason is that the US translation was delayed, and they had just sent it out. In that case, they could only continue to wait. While waiting, Poplar Fruit finally finished learning Spanish. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Spanish was the second most common language in the world, second only to Chinese. English, which was the most commonly learned language in China, was only ranked third. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit had mastered the top 3 languages in the world. Spanish was not easy to learn, especially its pronunciation. It was also the first time that Poplar Fruit came into contact with a large tongue sound. He had never encountered it in his previous studies of English, French, and German. Because it was his first time learning, there was no one to guide him. Poplar Fruit could only look for tutorials on the internet to study. In the beginning, Poplar Fruit curled his tongue and practiced exhalation all day long. After persisting for more than 10 days, he finally mastered the great tongue sound. It was also because he practiced too hard that Poplar Fruit's tongue was curled up when he spoke. Song Jiwen even laughed at him, saying that he met a fierce girl and got his tongue bitten while kissing. However, after learning the big tongue sound, Poplar Fruit realized that his tongue was much better. Moreover, the big tongue sound had many other benefits. Especially when she was teasing Chichi, Yang Guo would roll her tongue and make a series of lay sounds. Chichi would be so shocked that her little mouth would turn into an O shape, and then she would laugh happily. Other things that needed to be memorized, such as the Latin alphabet, the use of punctuation marks different from English and Chinese, such as inverted question marks and inverted exclamation marks, grammar, vocabulary, and so on, were not difficult for Poplar Fruit. All he needed to do was spend some time and it was not a problem. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit realized that those who could speak N languages were definitely not ordinary people. Let's not talk about those Spanish, English, German, and French words that look a bit similar. In terms of word structure, Spanish, French, and German are all divided into feminine and masculine, but the masculine and feminine of each language are different. Spanish was very strange. For example, men's shirts were feminine. But who would have thought that men's shirts were feminine? Do men wear women's clothes? If Poplar Fruit had not been able to master all of them through rote memorization, and if he wanted to determine the masculine and the feminine like other people, wouldn't he have been driven crazy by all kinds of strange rules after learning 2 or 3 languages? When Poplar Fruit was looking for foreigners to practice Spanish on the internet, he also found that there were differences in the accents of Spanish spoken in different places. This might be the same as the various dialects of Chinese. Poplar Fruit practiced Castilian, which was the language that people usually referred to. Some people said that Spanish was a language to talk to God. Poplar Fruit did not think much of it. In terms of beauty, Poplar Fruit felt that Chinese and French were not inferior to Spanish. However, Spanish songs were still very pleasant to listen to. For example, the theme song of last year's World Cup, Waka Waka, was written and sung by Shakira. Every time Poplar Fruit listened to it, he felt his blood boil. The advantage of learning Spanish was that Spanish and Portuguese were very similar in writing, but there were certain differences in pronunciation. However, compared to learning a new language from scratch, this was much better. Just how similar were they? In fact, the difference between the words may be only 1 or 2 letters, and there was not much difference in grammar. Generally, Spanish speakers could easily read Portuguese books, and vice versa. However, the pronunciation needed to be relearned. Here was an analogy. The difference between Spanish and Portuguese was like the difference between Mandarin and Cantonese. The grammatical structure was not much different, but the pronunciation of words was different. It was difficult to guess correctly. It took a lot of effort to understand. Learning had to be done step by step, and it was important to strike a balance between work and rest. Recently, Song Juwen's work was not so busy, so as long as he was free at night, Song Juwen would take Poplar Fruit to the gym to exercise. The reason why they did not play basketball was mainly because Kiki needed someone to take care of her. If Kitten did not come to help take care of her, Poplar Fruit would not feel at ease leaving her alone to play. However, Poplar Fruit and Song Juwen's favorite was still playing basketball. Therefore, on another weekend, Kitten came as promised. Poplar Fruit quickly pulled Song Juwen, changed into the jersey and shoes, and walked to the basketball court. Sitting on the sidelines and waiting for the change, Uncle Jin, Shu Cai, saw Poplar Fruit and the others from afar. He patted his butt, stood up, and greeted them with a smile. He smiled and said, "Xiao Yang, after waiting for half a month, I can finally wait for you again." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Uncle Jin, are you so eager to see me? Wouldn't it be easier for you to play without us?" Uncle Jin smiled and said, The feeling of being defeated by Dugu is not good. With you guys here, we can play with more passion." Since there were new people, Uncle Jin asked everyone to form a new team. After warming up, Poplar Fruit, Song Juwen, and an uncle who looked to be in his 40s formed a team. Because the ball did not pass, Uncle Jin, Uncle Dao, and Uncle Ban sat off the court and waited. This time, Poplar Fruit changed his style of breaking through and passing the ball to his teammates. He let Song Juwen be the point guard, and he moved in and out of position. As long as the opponent was not paying attention, he could run out of space. Although Song Juwen, as a point guard, did not have a wide passing field and did not control the strength of the pass very well, he just stared at Poplar Fruit, grasped the timing very well, and passed 2 good balls in a row. Poplar Fruit also shot after receiving the ball. Whether there was anyone in front of him or not, his shot was like his sniper rifle. As long as he threw it out, it could steadily go into the basket. "This guy. He has become stronger again," Uncle Jin thought to himself. In the past, Poplar Fruit had not shown such accurate shooting. Now that he showed his shooting ability, it was even harder to defend. After 2 consecutive shots were scored by Poplar Fruit, the group of uncles on the opposite side decided to send someone to follow Poplar Fruit at all costs. Wherever Poplar Fruit went, he would be there. He was like a gangrene attached to the bone, and there was no way to get rid of him. But how could Poplar Fruit be so easy to stop? He first passed the ball back to Song Juwen, then ran to the other side. Although he still could not get rid of him, when Poplar Fruit received the ball again, he did not choose to shoot immediately. Instead, he tapped lightly, and the uncle who was guarding him jumped up. Poplar Fruit then easily bypassed him, accelerated, and got a layup. 3-0. The first group of uncles was easily defeated by Poplar Fruit and the others. "We still have to play." Uncle Jin stood up, twisted his waist, and laughed. During the time when Poplar Fruit was not here, Uncle Jin and the others were not idle. In private, they also thought about how to restrain Poplar Fruit. To deal with a super player like Poplar Fruit who could break, shoot, and shoot, they had to learn from the American NBA. If the other teams could not stop him with 1 player, they would send 2 players to deal with him. The 2 players would attack him from both sides, forcing him to shoot or pass hastily. The biggest problem with 2 players attacking him from both sides was that one of the opponents would definitely run out of space. Then, they could only bet that the person who received the ball would not make the shot. After all, they would rather let the role player make 2 more shots than let Kobe go crazy. So, Uncle Jin and the others used this method to deal with Poplar Fruit. Uncle Dao missed a long shot, and Poplar Fruit grabbed the defensive rebound and passed it to Song Jiwen to dribble the ball out of the three-point line. At this time, Poplar Fruit found that Uncle Dao and Uncle Ban had one person close to him to defend, and the other person was nearby ready to attack from both sides. This was to prevent him from receiving the ball. Poplar Fruit's eyelids twitched. He waved his hand to let Song Jiwen, who had no one to defend, attack. However, Song Jiwen's long shot was not accurate. He tried to break in, but Uncle Jin occupied the area under the basket. He could not squeeze past Uncle Jin for a layup. So, he had no choice but to retreat and try a long shot. However, the long shot did not go in, and the rebound was snatched by Uncle Jin, who had a big waist. The uncle in Poplar Fruit's team was really not good. He did not know how to position himself, and only knew how to drill under the basket. Although he was also very strong, his lower limbs were weak. Uncle Jin gently pushed him, and he could not stand still. After getting the ball, Uncle Jin took advantage of the weakness of the uncle in Poplar Fruit's team. Uncle Jin forced Poplar Fruit to help defend, and then the ball was passed to Uncle Dao. Uncle Dao accurately shot a long shot, and Poplar Fruit's team lost the ball first. This was not going to work. Poplar Fruit knew that his team's defense was definitely not good enough. He could only fight with brute force. Uncle Guo, let me do it. You guard against him. In the next defense, Poplar Fruit let Uncle Guo guard out, and Poplar Fruit guarded the area under the basket and followed Uncle Dao to grab the rebound. Uncle Guo did not guard against Uncle Dao, and Uncle Dao passed by him with a shake. However, Poplar Fruit did not have high hopes for Uncle Guo. He had expected this situation. As long as Uncle Dao did not comfortably shoot a long shot, it would be a success. Sure enough, after Uncle Dao scored another shot, he finally missed the shot, and the rebound was taken by the younger Poplar Fruit. Although the score was 2-0, and Poplar Fruit's team was in danger, Poplar Fruit was not afraid at all. He passed the ball to Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, shoot boldly, don't be afraid." He cruised around the 3-second zone, and Uncle Dao and Uncle Ban followed him like his shadow. Song Jiwen listened to Poplar Fruit's command, took 2 steps inside the 3-point line, and began to take deep breaths. No one guarded against him, and he calmly shot the ball. "No!" Uncle Jin roared, and the basketball bounced high on the basket. He squeezed Uncle Guo and jumped up, and the ball was about to be caught. Suddenly, a big yellow hand appeared in front of him. Uncle Jin turned his head in horror and saw Poplar Fruit jump to his right. They had seen Poplar Fruit's terrifying jumping ability, and this time, although Poplar Fruit jumped a little later, he jumped higher. When Uncle Jin stopped rising, Poplar Fruit was already 2 heads higher than him, and he was still rising slowly. Uncle Jin looked at Poplar Fruit hopelessly in the air. His right hand reached above the basketball, and then he heavily dunked the ball into the basket. Single-handed mid-air dunk. Was this a neighborhood court or an NBA court? How could they see such a big dunk here? Everyone on and off the court was stunned. Uncle Jin looked at Poplar Fruit, who let go of the basket and jumped down, and thought gloomily, "How can I play like this?" Without 2 people guarding him, he could easily break through or shoot. With 2 people attacking him, his teammates couldn't shoot, but he could still fill in. There was no way he could guard. The result was obvious. With Poplar Fruit's rebound guarantee, Song Jiwen's confidence increased greatly, and he even hit one of his next 2 shots. In the end, Poplar Fruit's team counterattacked Uncle Jin's team with a score of 3-2. No matter how much he thought about it, he still couldn't see through Poplar Fruit. Chapter 68. Shua. The basketball made a circle of white waves in the basket, which also announced that Poplar Fruit's team had defeated Uncle Jin's team once again. It was the 3rd time. Uncle Jin put his hands on his waist and looked at Poplar Fruit helplessly. In the 2nd round, Poplar Fruit still won by making a layup. In the 3rd round, Poplar Fruit changed his style of play and no longer relied on his incredible jump to influence the game. Just when Uncle Jin and the others saw the dawn of victory, Poplar Fruit unexpectedly used 2 almost impossible jump shots to extinguish their hope again. The first jump shot was from outside the 3-point line. Although Poplar Fruit suddenly jumped, Uncle Jin, who was following him closely, was not careless and jumped close to him. Poplar Fruit jumped very high, but Uncle Jin still tried to cover Poplar Fruit's eyes with his hand to obstruct Poplar Fruit's view of the shot. However, Poplar Fruit still made the shot. Even if his view was blocked, even if there was someone in front of him, even if it was from outside the three-point line, Poplar Fruit still made the shot unreasonably. It was as unstoppable as the sharpshooters in the NBA. What else could Uncle Jin and the others say? The second jump shot was from inside the three-point line. In this round, Uncle Jin and the others could be said to have forced Poplar Fruit into a corner. The three of them went up together and surrounded Poplar Fruit from the front, back, left, and right. They did not give Poplar Fruit any space to pass the ball. Even if his body was strong, it was impossible to break through the encirclement of three people, right? Uncle Jin was full of joy, thinking that he had finally defended once. However, Poplar Fruit made another jump shot. This time, Uncle Jin and Poplar Fruit jumped at the same time. Although the other two uncles reacted a little slower, they still jumped after them. I must be able to defend. Uncle Jin saw that his big hand blocked Young was passing route. He felt that this time, it was a sure thing. However, he found that when he began to fall, Poplar Fruit was still rising. Don't worry, we still have teammates. Uncle Jin comforted himself because he saw the two uncles who had caught up from behind once again put their big hands in front of Poplar Fruit. However, when he landed on the ground and Uncle Dao and Uncle Ban stopped their ascent, Poplar Fruit was still floating in the air. What kind of bounce was that? What kind of suspension was that? After the two uncles fell, they could no longer block Poplar Fruit's shot. They saw Poplar Fruit straighten his waist in the air, and with the help of the new force, his right wrist shook slightly. The basketball flew out, drawing a high parabola in the air, and then plunged into the basket. This was also the scene at the beginning of the game. Poplar Fruit once again made an unreasonable long shot, and finished off Uncle Jin's team 3 times in a row. To be honest, in terms of individual strength, except for Poplar Fruit, the other two players in Poplar Fruit's team were not comparable to the 3 uncles. However, Poplar Fruit alone could take on 2 or even 3 opponents. This was the power of a star player. One person could hold up the sky. Even if his teammates were bad, such as Uncle Guo's skills and body, Poplar Fruit could lead them to victory. However, Poplar Fruit did not like this, because he was not Kobe Bryant. He did not like to have all the ball in his hands. Like last time, Poplar Fruit's team had Arfeng, and Arfeng's strength was not bad. Poplar Fruit was relieved to be the point guard. He relied on his own breakthrough to gain space for his teammates, and then passed the ball to let his teammates score. Compared to one-on-one, Poplar Fruit preferred team basketball, because everyone could feel the joy of basketball. Speak of the devil. When Poplar Fruit was still thinking of Arfeng, he suddenly heard Arfeng's surprised cry. "Brother Yang, you are here too. Great." Poplar Fruit turned his head and looked. Arfeng followed a very tall boy from the entrance of the court. The boy was much taller than Poplar Fruit. He was at least 1.95 meters tall. He was not thin, and the muscles on his arms were very thick. He looked like a fierce general. "Why are you so late?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "My cousin came today, so I played a little late." Arfeng explained, "This is my cousin, Enchanting. He is on the school team of Guangdong Polytechnic University. So strong." Poplar Fruit knew that Guangdong Polytechnic University's basketball team was a strong team that participated in the Cub. The Cubs was different from the Cuba. This competition was called the Great Super League, and professional athletes were allowed to participate. As long as they could provide a study-in-school certificate, professional players registered in the China Basketball Association could also participate. Guangdong Polytechnic University's basketball team used to have Emperor Yi, Zhu Fengyu, and other badass players. They also won many Cubs championships, so their strength could be seen. "Hello," Enchanting was very friendly and reached out his hand to shake Poplar Fruit's hand. He said, "I heard from Xiaofeng that you play very well. Today, I also came because of your reputation." No, how good can it be?" Arfeng exaggerated. "We are all amateurs, and we secretly exercise our bodies." Poplar Fruit said modestly. "Haha, you came at the right time today. Uncle Jin patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and laughed. This kid, he didn't come once in half a month. We rarely see him, but as soon as we see him, we are beaten by him. Ha ha. When it came to basketball, Enziming's tone became more serious. He said, actually, when we were at the entrance, we saw that Brother Yang was really good at basketball. His jumping ability was better than many of the people on our school team. I really want to play against you. Then let's learn from each other. Uncle Jin said happily, you come to our team, Xiaofeng go to Poplar Fruit's team. Finally, there was an expert that seemed to be able to restrain Poplar Fruit. Uncle Jin secretly thought with tears streaming down his face, God, you finally gave us a chance to defeat the great landlord Yang. With a match between experts, the other team's uncles were also very happy. They sat down and continued to be spectators. If they went up, they would be beaten, but if they watched from the sidelines, they could rest for a while. After they were divided into groups, they changed the rules this time. It was 4 against 4, and they played 5 balls. The first to kick off was Poplar Fruit's team. Uncle Guo knew that he was not good enough, so he ran outside the center circle to serve. Poplar Fruit received the ball and signaled for everyone to spread out. He wanted to play 1v1 Enziming. Although he was very humble just now, Poplar Fruit was still a young man in his late 20s. After all, there was still a competitive spirit in his bones. It was rare to meet a professional opponent, so Poplar Fruit wanted to measure his opponent's strength. The two of them faced each other between the 3-point line and the free throw line, and Poplar Fruit started to dribble the ball in a very flashy way. Poplar Fruit had never trained professionally. He learned his moves from TV. Although he could dribble the ball from his crotch and behind his back, he could not string these moves together to break through the opponent's routine. Enziming was very experienced in dealing with Poplar Fruit. After all, he was someone who had played in big games. He steadily bent his knees and stared at Poplar Fruit's shoulder, and did not rush forward to snatch the ball. In fact, Enziming also had his difficulties. How could he not want to snatch the ball? However, Poplar Fruit's dribbling speed was too fast. If he tried to snatch the ball, he did not have full confidence that he could snatch it. Who knows, maybe Poplar Fruit would take the opportunity to break through. Enziming dealt with all changes by remaining unchanged, not leaving any openings. This gave Poplar Fruit a headache. He simply tried to break through from Enziming's left side, and Enziming immediately blocked him. It's not that easy, Poplar Fruit shouted in his heart. He skillfully dribbled the ball from behind, passed the ball to his left hand, and then changed his body's center of gravity to the left. Poplar Fruit's speed was really fast. Enziming almost let him change direction and break through. However, Enziming was really experienced. He stuck close to Poplar Fruit, used his advantage of height and long arms, and firmly blocked Poplar Fruit's path to the basket. Poplar Fruit forced a shot, but the ball did not go in. Uncle Jin even ran over to pick up the rebound. This time, it was Enziming's turn to solo Poplar Fruit. Enziming thought that since he was nearly 10 centimeters taller than Poplar Fruit, he could rely on his body to take on Poplar Fruit. Therefore, he turned sideways, and wanted to use his shoulder to break through Poplar Fruit. However, how could Poplar Fruit let him have his way? He steadily got into a horse stance, and blocked Enziming's attacks again and again. He did not know that this gave Enziming a great shock. He was pushing against Poplar Fruit, and it was like he was pushing against a towering tree. The tree did not move, but he was exhausted. How strong was Poplar Fruit? However, he was not so stubborn that he had to go all the way. He suddenly twisted his shoulder, and brushed past Poplar Fruit. I broke through. Enziming thought. He made a standard layup, and his right hand was almost at the edge of the backboard. Careful. Uncle Jin and the others' cries of surprise could be heard. Enziming was shocked to see Yang Guo leap up from behind him like an eagle spreading its wings. Then, with a slap of his hand, he smacked the basketball that he had just released onto the backboard. What a big hat. So strong. Enziming watched Poplar Fruit jump again and get the backboard. His eyes were burning with the desire to fight. It was only interesting to have such an opponent. Enziming's desire to fight had been completely stimulated by Poplar Fruit. Both of them could not do anything to each other for the time being. Poplar Fruit was the first to change his strategy. He no longer played alone. Poplar Fruit asked Ah Feng and Song Jiwen to run. As for Uncle Guo, he was already tired enough, so there was no need for him to run. It was good enough that he could pass the ball. Poplar Fruit passed the ball to Song Jiwen, who ran out of space and cut inside himself. Song Jiwen did not have time to shoot, and Uncle Ban had already rushed up, so he immediately passed the ball to Ah Feng. Ah Feng threw a high pass to Poplar Fruit, who ran inside. And Ziming quickly ran over and followed Uncle Ban with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit forced himself to jump and make a shooting motion. Come down. And Ziming jumped up high, and his right hand slammed toward the ball. Uncle Ban also tried his best to block Poplar Fruit's front right side. But Poplar Fruit did not really shoot. He just gently threw the ball behind his head. He was pretending to be a pro. And he passed the ball without looking. Just when Poplar Fruit received the ball, he caught a glimpse of Song Jiwen getting rid of the defense and running to his back. So he had an idea in his mind. Poplar Fruit jumped up, attracted everyone's attention, and then unexpectedly passed the ball to Song Jiwen. At this time, it was too late for Uncle Ban to follow and defend. Song Jiwen easily made a layup in the open space and scored the first point. Good shot. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen high-fived and said, "Good pass." Song Jiwen also said very happily. And Ziming looked at them with a smile, but in his heart, he was happy to see the game. This was interesting. The strength of the two teams was relatively equal. Although Uncle Guo was a bit of a hindrance, Poplar Fruit made up for this shortcoming very well. So the two teams did not give way to each other at both ends of the offense and defense. If you score one, I will definitely pass the next round and return one to you. Winning or losing this game was no longer important. Such a wonderful game made the audience off the court exclaim. Poplar Fruit and Ziming, the two strongest players, were also evenly matched. It was difficult to tell who would win. Chapter 69. It's finally here. Poplar Fruit put down the phone and waved his fist happily. Poplar Fruit had been waiting for 2 weeks ever since the staff of Yin Yang Web informed him of the results of the second round of assessment. Finally, the manuscript for the third round of test translation was sent over. Kiki was sleeping. She only went out for a while, so Poplar Fruit was not worried. He grabbed his keys and ran out in a hurry, dragging a pair of slippers with him. When he arrived at the entrance of the residential area where the sun was shining, he finally received a copy of the manuscript from the courier. When he got home, Poplar Fruit used a small knife to cut open the package that was still steaming hot. He took out a thin stack of paper and flipped through it. The manuscript was only 5 pages. They were all photocopied in English and had a red confidentiality seal on them. Poplar Fruit rubbed the 5 pages and sighed, "It's not easy to get your hands on this. It would be great if it was an electronic version. He could just send it to the mailbox and receive it immediately." However, he could not blame Dongshin Publishing and Yin Yang Web. After all, they had the photocopied version that was sent over the sea. It could only be said that the Americans had a strong sense of confidentiality. As long as they could guarantee that the manuscript would not be leaked before the official publication, they did not care about anything complicated. Poplar Fruit could not wait. He did not even eat lunch and started reading the English manuscript in his hands. It had to be said that Poplar Fruit's English was now close to the peak. An American whose mother tongue was English might not be able to compare to Poplar Fruit. After a few months of translation, Poplar Fruit was now able to read English materials as easily as reading his mother tongue materials. If he could read technical documents that were full of obscure industry terms, what more a biography? In the previous preparation work, Poplar Fruit had specially looked for terms from the computer industry and other related high-tech industries for deep learning. But now, it seemed that it was unnecessary. The terms that he learned were too profound. Not to mention how much Isaacson, as a biographer, could understand. Even if he did, he would not use them too much in his book. After all, how many readers would be willing to read a biography full of unfamiliar words? Of course, this didn't mean that Poplar Fruit's preparations were completely useless. In order to seize this opportunity, he did his best to search for reports and information on sect leader Qiao and the more famous executives in his company. This time, it came in handy. Because the test version was about Jonathan. Jonathan Ive, the head of Apple's design team, also designed Poplar Fruit's favorite iPad. While searching for information, Poplar Fruit learned about Jonathan Watson. Poplar Fruit didn't realize how important Ari Fu was to Apple and Steve Jobs until he read the draft. Sect leader Qiao said, "The difference is that Jonathan has made, is not only at Apple but in the world, is huge." The meaning of this sentence was, the changes brought by Jonathan, Steve Jobs affectionately called him Johnny, not only in Apple, but also in the world, have a huge impact. Sect leader Qiao even said, "If I had a spiritual partner at Apple, it's Johnny." This sentence was a bit ambiguous. It was, "If I had a spiritual partner at Apple, it would be Johnny." However, the translation of the word spiritual partner was still debatable. If the word spiritual partner or soulmate were used to describe two men, it would sound like they were in love. Of course, if it was a spiritual partner, or spiritual partner, the translation effect would be much weaker. It would not reflect Steve Jobs' deep love and dependence for Jonathan. This was also the charm of literary translation. They were not like technical documents, where a source language word corresponded to only one translated word. As long as the corresponding meaning could be translated, it would be fine. Literary translation required the translator to carefully figure out the author's writing intent. What kind of message does he want the reader to receive? What does he want to convey by using this word? What is his hidden intention in choosing this way of expression? These translators had to understand thoroughly before they started translating. Secondly, when you choose which words and sentences to use to translate this paragraph, you need to carefully consider whether the information that the author wants to express can be reflected in your translation. Is their translation in line with the reading habits of the target language reader? Did his translation work perfectly with the context? There were many things that needed to be considered. These were the things that fascinated people who were willing to engage in literary translation, but also the limitations of literary translation. It was important to note that literary translation remuneration had never been very high in the industry. After many years of development, the price of literary translation had not increased much compared to more than 10 years ago. Of course, this was not absolute. The translation price of some best-selling books was not low, but even if it was high, it would not be much more than technical document. Translators of the same level would have to put in 3 times more effort than technical documents when translating literary works. Sometimes, the money in exchange would not even be as much as technical documents, or it could be said that the effort and return were not proportional at all. How could young translators, who had the heavy responsibility of supporting their families, be motivated to enter this circle? As long as possible, who would be willing to give up technical document translation work, which could easily make several times more money, and turn to the painstaking and thankless literary translation work? At present, literary translation was mostly done by the older generation of translators, and there were also many university professors doing part-time jobs. The emerging strength of the younger generation was almost non-existent, and there was a mix of good and bad. Some of the translated translations were all in vernacular, or even British Chinese, which was very difficult to read. Some people even published papers saying that this was a manifestation of cultural integration. However, was it really good to put something that people could not understand on the market? Back to Yang Guo's side of the story. Poplar Fruit was fascinated by this manuscript. Isaacson was indeed a master of biography. He was extremely good at using concise words to express a lot of information. This was just like Apple's design philosophy of simplicity. It looked simple, but it was not ordinary. Isaacson described the simplicity of Apple's product design as follows: simple isn't just a visual style. It's not just minimalism the absence of clutter. It involves digging through the depth of complexity. The literal translation of the meaning was, simplicity is not just a visual effect, nor is it just cutting or erasing the messy things. It is related to the depth of complexity. Poplar Fruit had a deep feeling about this, especially his favorite iPhone 4, which was Sir Chiao's masterpiece. The front and back panels of the iPhone 4 used a special tempered glass design. This was unprecedented. Not only did it improve the touch and sense of security, but it also improved the look of the iPhone by more than a level. It completely left the other plastic phones on the market dozens of streets behind. This design looked very simple, wasn't it, just sticking two pieces of glass on top? However, its technical complexity was probably only understood by Apple's design team. Of course, nothing was perfect. Even for the iPhone 4, there were conflicts in design and engineering. When Jonathan designed the iPhone 4, he hoped to use a new steel ring design. This steel ring was the support structure of the body, and it could also play the role of the finishing touch on the overall design. It looked very sleek and felt very textured. And part of the steel ring could also be used as the phone's antenna. The steel ring played a crucial role in making the iPhone 4 so thin. However, this also brought a big problem: the steel ring would weaken the phone's signal. The engineer had suggested that Jonathan spray a coating on the outside of the steel ring, but Jonathan thought that it would affect the appearance of his brushed metal. Later, he chose a design with a small gap in the steel ring. This design also caused the antenna door incident. If the phone was held with the left hand, the palm would cover the small gap, so there was a 1% chance of signal loss. The problem wasn't small, but it couldn't hide the beauty of Apple's design. It also couldn't hide Jonathan's pursuit of perfection in design. Moreover, Apple's later series of public relations measures also solved the crisis very well. Looking at the history between sect leader Chiao and Jonathan, these two good friends, Poplar Fruit side. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. Sect Master Chiao was able to understand Jonathan's lofty ambitions and faith in design. He was able to show unparalleled importance to design. This was probably the reason why Jonathan had always been loyal to Sect Master Chiao, and Jonathan was able to understand sect leader Chiao's needs, and they had the same understanding of the concept of beauty. This was also the reason why sect leader Chiao trusted and valued Jonathan from the beginning to the end. In the vast sea of people, it was really not easy to meet someone who understood you so well and supported you so well. Sect leader Chiao, I'm afraid you've also wondered why Jonathan was a bearded man and not a graceful woman, right? Meeting each other, snuggling up to each other, but not being able to love each other might be one of your life's biggest regrets, right? Poplar Fruit had a smirk on his face as he thought. Aya, too rotten. Poplar Fruit, you're about to go crazy from being a homebody. How can you harbor such deep malice towards your idol? Unable to let his thoughts run wild, Poplar Fruit shook his head and focused on reading. However, there were only 5 pages. Before long, Poplar Fruit had already flipped to the last page. Why is there no more? Why is there so little? What happened at the end? Poplar Fruit slammed the table and shouted, I still want to read. He had just seen that Steve Jobs had returned to Apple and pulled back Jonathan, who had resigned and was about to leave. When Apple's designer-led engineer once again, there was nothing at the end. Why was it so fraudulent? Would it kill him to read a little more? Poplar Fruit felt like his heart was being scratched by a cat. Just as he was getting excited, the result came to an abrupt end. This feeling was like throwing a punch with all his might only to hit empty air. It was very depressing. No, I can't wait a few months before I can continue reading. Poplar Fruit stood up and paced back and forth in the living room with his head in his hands. Only by passing this test would he have the opportunity to read the rest of the text earlier. Poplar Fruit had not eaten lunch yet, so he hastily cooked some noodles for himself and finished them quickly. After simply satisfying his appetite, Poplar Fruit sat in front of the computer and enthusiastically began the third and final round of the translation test. He clenched his fists and his eyes shone with confidence as he thought to himself, this time, I will do my best to recruit translators. I, Poplar Fruit, will definitely be the translator of sect leader Chiao's biography. Chapter 70. Bang, bang. In the basketball stadium of Guangdong University of Technology, 2 tall boys were having a one-on-one bullfight. 2 boys were sitting on the floor on the side of the court, sweating profusely. Fuck, Dong Xiaofang, You cheated. The boy with a crew cut was caught off guard by the boy named Dong Xiaofang. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dong Xiaofang turned around to get rid of him, then bent down to catch the basketball. He jumped up, and the basketball bounced gently on the white line of the backboard and fell into the basket. After landing, he picked up the basketball, bounced it in his hand, and said with a smile, "All is fair in war. If you lose, you lose. Qiu Xin, don't deny it. Temph, I'll kill you in the next game." Qiu Xin smashed his right fist on his left palm, turned his head and sat with the other two. "It's my turn." The boy sitting on the far left patted his butt and stood up. In fact, there was no dust on the smooth wooden court. He just flattened his sweat-soaked pants. He was a little shorter than Dong Xiaofang and Qiu Xin, but he was still more than 1.8 meters tall. His body was very strong, and the two strong chest muscles on his chest were about to burst his jersey. When Dong Xiaofang saw him, his face drooped. He wailed, "Master Ji, don't bully me. My small arms and legs can't carry you." Dong Xiaofang raised his thigh, which was not as thick as the boy named Zhong Jie's arm. Zhong Jie smiled and said, "It's okay. I won't eat you by force." After the kickoff, Zhong Jie received the basketball thrown by Dong Xiaofang from outside the three-point line, and then began to dribble the ball slowly. Looking at Zhong Jie's slow movements, Dong Xiaofang felt a lot of pressure. Every time Zhong Jie's arm swung, the muscles of his whole body undulated, like a small mountain rolling. It looked very scary. Every time Zhong Jie took a step forward, Dong Xiaofang couldn't help but take a step back. "Dong Xiaofang, what are you playing?" The mature-looking boy sitting with Qiu Xin scolded. "Why are you afraid of him? Go and grab the ball. If you retreat without a fight, why do you still want to play basketball?" His tone was similar to that of his parents, who had expected better from him. After being scolded, Dong Xiaofang lowered his head and replied, "Yes, Captain." He was a freshman who had only been in school for a year. He still had deep respect for the captain of the school team who had served for 3 years. As a traditional strong basketball school in the south, Guangdong Provincial University of Technology often had professional players in the team. It was not easy for Deng Jian, an ordinary student, to stand out from several professional players and become the captain of the school team. Of course, Deng Jian's skills were still very strong. Every year, many NBL and even CBA teams threw him an olive branch. However, Deng Jian did not get what he wanted because of the layers of resistance from his family. Dong Xiaofang was the one with the most potential among the freshmen in the school team. Deng Jian had taken a fancy to him during the freshman selection last year. However, Dong Xiaofang relied too much on his talent. He wasn't willing to endure hardships and didn't practice his basic skills properly. Even when he was competing, he liked to play tricks. This was something that Deng Jian found hard to let go of. He had high expectations for him, but he was even more disappointed. Zhong Jie straightened up, patted the ball on the spot and said, "Xiaofang, I said I won't eat you by force, so I won't eat you by force. Fight bravely." "Okay." Dong Xiaofang nodded and tried his best to stick to him. He raised one hand in the air and tried to grab Zhong Jie's basketball with the other. Hee. The corner of Zhong Jie's mouth twitched, and he suddenly made a move. Although he was tall and sturdy, his agility wasn't bad at all. He lightly arched his buttocks, and then with his left leg as an axis, he turned his body and bypassed Dong Xiaofang. However, Dong Xiaofang did not give up. He was much faster than Zhong Jie. He gritted his teeth, his chest pressed against Zhong Jie's big arm, and followed Zhong Jie closely. His long arm waved in front of Zhong Jie, interfering with his layup. However, Zhong Jie was an old team member who was almost in his senior year. He was experienced. He knew that Dong Xiaofang wanted to stick close to him and rush down. His shoulders suddenly lowered, and then he took a step back. Suddenly, without support, Dong Xiaofang was suddenly brought forward by the strength of his body and staggered a few steps. At this time, Zhong Jie seized the opportunity and easily made a 45-degree shot that was almost under the basket. Although his arm strength was too big and he could not control the strength of his outside shot, Zhong Jie did not hesitate to make a shot in such a position where almost anyone could make a shot. If he did not make such a shot, It would really be a disgrace to the school team of Guangdong University of Technology. Although he did not guard against the shot, Deng Jian still applauded Dong Xiaofang's efforts. He shouted in a deep voice, "Good play. That's the way. You can only win if you dare to fight." He did not expect Dong Xiaofang to be able to guard against the impact of a player inside the three-point line as an outside player, but he must have such an attitude. As soon as his voice fell, the door of the basketball stadium was pushed open with a creak. The group of people turned their heads and saw An Ziming in a jersey walk in. Brother An, Ming Zai, Old An, and other greetings were endless. An Ziming responded to them one by one, and then he asked curiously, "Captain, why are there so few people today?" Deng Jian smiled and said, "Isn't the World University Games held in Shengta City recently? A few of them went to volunteer, and a few of them went to join in the fun. Dafu and Jiaxuan went back to their hometown 2 days ago for the summer vacation. It's not bad to have so many people. Didn't they volunteer for the Asian Games last year? Why did they go to the World University Games again? I don't think it's rare." And Ziming shook his head. They're lucky to be able to participate in such a world-class sports event when they're still students, and they're even able to volunteer. I think after this time, I don't know how many years later there will be another one. Just let them have fun. It's okay. Hihi, I think only the freshmen like to join in the fun. Qiu Xin said, "We don't have the enthusiasm to stand guard in such a hot weather. What freshmen like to join in the fun?" Dong Xiaofang said discontentedly, "I didn't go, okay?" Deng Jian hit the nail on the head and said, "You didn't go because you are lazy." The captain's words made everyone laugh. Dong Xiaofang muttered, "It's not interesting." As they chatted, their bullfight continued. Dong Xiaofang really couldn't compete with Zhong Jie in terms of strength, but he also had his advantages. Dong Xiaofang's speed was very fast. He could run 100 meters in under 12.5 seconds, and his body was also very flexible. Speed was difficult to show in half of the bullfight, but flexibility was different. Dong Xiaofang's left and right hands were bouncing the ball faster and faster, and the range was also getting bigger and bigger, to the point where his knees needed to swing back and forth every time he bounced the ball. His dribbling was not just a simple two-handed dribbling, nor was it limited to one posture. Instead, it was a high-speed transition between high, low, crotch, back, and other different movements. It was different from Poplar Fruit's simple dribbling. His every movement looked like he was going to break through, making people unable to understand his intentions. Although he had been teammates with Dong Xiaofang for so long, Zhong Jie still couldn't figure out which of Dong Xiaofang's movements were real and which were fake. His speed was too fast, and he didn't dare to rush forward, for fear of being broken through. Dong Xiaofang suddenly turned his act into reality. He moved his right leg and was about to sweep past Zhong Jie's left side. Zhong Jie hurriedly followed, but Dong Xiaofang dribbled the ball from behind. His right hand was empty, and then his left hand received the ball. His body swayed, and he was about to change direction. Not good. Zhong Jie quickly twisted his strong body and moved his right leg, wanting to follow. However, Dong Xiaofang's movement was also fake. He was waiting for Zhong Jie to spread his legs apart and couldn't jump for a while. Then, he took a step back, jumped up forcefully with his waist, and shot a pull-up shot. Dong Xiaofang's shot was very accurate. In a situation where Zhong Jie couldn't interfere with him, the basketball was like an infrared guided missile, accurately falling into the basket. This was Dong Xiaofang's super talent. He was a bit like my DI, with good physical fitness, accurate mid-range shots, sharp breakthroughs, and pull-up jump shot. However, he also inherited my DI's fatal shortcomings: over-reliance on talent, weak defensive willpower, and not enough fighting spirit. If he could be down-to-earth and train seriously, in the future, he might be able to become a general in Guangdong University of Technology, or even a professional club. Therefore, while Deng Jian was disgusted with Dong Xiaofang's laziness, he still forced Dong Xiaofang to strengthen his training like a goat, honing his fighting spirit that was willing to endure hardships. After a few rounds of training, An Ziming wiped the sweat off his face and said to Deng Jian, "Captain, this won't work. If we don't compete, everyone won't be enthusiastic, and it won't be effective." Deng Jian nodded in agreement and said, "I know, But how can we compete at this time? There are only 5 of us, and we can't even form 2 teams. If we want to compete with other teams, and it's the holidays, who would still be in school? Why don't we find a professional team to practice with? Or we can be their sparring partners. And Ziming said with his eyes shining. You wish, Deng Jian said with a smile, with just the few of us, do you think we're qualified to be the professional team's sparring partners? That was true. Other than Deng Jian, who was a stable starter for the school team, the others were only substitutes, or even the substitutes of substitutes. Without the support of those few professional players, the strength of the student players was still too far behind the strength of the club. Oh, that's true. And Ziming shook his head. Deng Jian said, at this time, it's not easy to find opponents of similar strength. Let's train like this and hold our spirits. When school starts, I'll contact opponents for everyone. There's not much difference in strength. And Ziming's eyes suddenly lit up and said, I know a few people who play well. He told them about his experience playing in Jinli district last time. You mean there's a Higoshiyama University graduate who's better than you? What's his name? Deng Jian was stunned. He didn't remember such a person. And Ziming's strength ranking in the school team was also very high. He was usually called the best 6th player. Poplar Fruit. Captain, you probably haven't heard of him. He didn't participate in the school team before, and Ziming said. It's not just Poplar Fruit. The other uncles are also very good. They play very methodically. Okay, you go and contact them. See if we can arrange a time for us to go and play with them. If we don't play, I'll feel bored. Deng Jian laughed. Okay, I'll go back and ask my cousin. And Ziming nodded. Chapter 71. Today, Duan Xueqing was very strange, Poplar Fruit thought. He had just called her. Originally, he wanted to go to the old house on the weekend and invite his old neighbors, Liu Guilin and Fang Wenjing, to have a meal. He also wanted her to go with him. However, when Poplar Fruit proposed to go over the weekend, Duan Xueqing was like a frightened rabbit. She directly refused Poplar Fruit's invitation. However, when Poplar Fruit asked her why, she stuttered. In the end, Duan Xueqing was rarely angry. She said, anyway, don't come over for a while. Then, she hung up the phone. This made Poplar Fruit feel confused. He could only smile bitterly and cancel his plans for the weekend. Poplar Fruit muttered in his heart, this girl, don't tell me she has a boyfriend. Could it be that he brought it home? Is it necessary to be so afraid of me finding out? Of course, Duan Xueqing didn't have a boyfriend like Poplar Fruit thought. However, in the past few days, Duan Xueqing's mother had come from Jiangnan province. Duan Xueqing didn't want her mother to meet Poplar Fruit so early. Jiangnan was located in the coastal area. The mountains and rivers were connected, and it nurtured the unique spirituality and wisdom of the people in Jiangnan. However, because Jiangnan's resources were relatively poor, there were more people than land. Agriculture alone couldn't support the survival of a family. Therefore, many people in Jiangnan were forced to travel north and south, and even go abroad. The hardships of traveling the world not only cultivated their hard-working spirit, but also inspired their enthusiasm for entrepreneurship and adventure. The genes of business flowed in the blood of Jiangnan people, and Duan Xueqing's family was the same. Her family owned more than 50 boutiques in Jiangnan, specializing in selling fashionable clothes and bags imported from France. They were also famous in the fashion industry in Jiangnan. Duan Xueqing had 2 older brothers. After they graduated from college, they gradually took over the family business under the guidance of their father. Duan Xueqing was the youngest girl in the family. Her family loved her very much. They knew that Duan Xueqing's cold personality was not suitable for business, so they didn't force her to go home. They just supported her to live the life she wanted. However, it didn't mean that they completely ignored her. Her daughter had been working for almost 2 months. Duan Xueqing's mother couldn't stay at home. She was worried that her daughter didn't live well, eat well, and work unhappy, so she took a plane to come to see her daughter. After Duan Xueqing's mother arrived, she was a little unsatisfied. because the place Duan Xueqing lived in was too shabby in her opinion. There was only one room and one living room, and the decorations weren't good either. She was still the little princess of a billionaire family. How could she live in such a small place? After she finished looking at the room Hotel Duan's, Xueqing, "Can't rent a good house? We can also buy a house. Live too far away from the place where you work. Then we can buy a car for you. If you don't like Beetles, we can buy a BMW." After Duan Xueqing went to college, she wanted to be independent. Especially after she got a job, she didn't want to spend her family's money. There was a deeper meaning, but it was always hidden in Duan Xueqing's heart. Duan Xueqing's mother wanted to change a better environment for her daughter to live a more comfortable life, but Duan Xueqing didn't want to. Because of that, the mother and daughter quarreled. The main reason was that Duan Xueqing didn't talk much and didn't like to explain. Under such circumstances, Duan Xueqing didn't want her mother to see poplar fruit and Kiki. Duan Xueqing's mother was experienced. If she knew the existence of poplar fruit, she would know what Duan Xueqing was thinking. More importantly, poplar fruit already had a daughter. If Duan Xueqing's mother knew that, the consequences would be unimaginable. Duan Xueqing knew poplar fruit well. If poplar fruit heard that his mother was coming, he would definitely invite Duan Xueqing's mother to have a meal. He always thought that he was a big brother. He didn't understand a woman's mind at all. Duan Xueqing was annoyed by the quarrel with her mother. She didn't want to explain too much to poplar fruit, so she pretended to be angry and hung up the phone. She didn't want poplar fruit to come over. However, after hanging up the phone, Duan Xueqing began to worry again. What if poplar fruit misunderstood? Was it bad of me to lose my temper just now? What if he thought that I was a girl who liked to throw tantrums and hated me? Duan Xueqing hugged her knees and sat on the bed. She was full of worries. Her long hair was spread on the pillow, and the light reflected a dark luster on it. Poplar fruit didn't know what Duan Xueqing was thinking. He didn't hate her as much as Duan Xueqing was worried about. Poplar fruit just thought that these were just small waves in life. They were nothing to worry about. Recently, he learned a new skill to tease Kiki, singing. Originally, he used his mobile phone and small speaker to play songs for Kiki. Kiki really liked to listen to it. However, he found out 2 days ago that Kiki preferred to listen to her father sing for her. Moreover, he wanted to sing in front of her. The recording couldn't fool Kiki. Poplar fruit didn't expect that Kiki would burst out with such enthusiasm as soon as he started to sing. At that time, he was humming Adele, an English female singer who became popular this year. Adkins sings someone _ you. This song was just released at the beginning of this year, and it occupied the first position in the major charts. The faint sadness under Adele's magnetic voice made this song popular all over the world. Although there was only the piano accompaniment, this song was sung by Adele with a very rhythmic feeling. It was like reciting a long poem, and the cadence was very pleasant to listen to. Poplar fruit walked in front of the rocking chair with a book in his hand. He pinched his voice and sang the climax of the song, "Don't forget me, I beg, I remember you said, sometimes it's last in love, sometimes it's hurts instead." At this time, Kiki suddenly shook her little hand excitedly and squealed. At first, poplar fruit didn't pay attention to it. When he walked over, his eyes lit up and he turned his head. Unsure, poplar fruit squatted down in front of the rocking chair and looked into Kiki's big, beautiful eyes. He sang the 2 lines of the song again and said in his heart, "Kiki, one more time for Papa to see." Looking at her father and being influenced by her father's singing, Chichi kicked her little feet and her eyes turned into 2 crescent moons. She opened her little mouth and called out, "Ooh, ooh, 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 ooh." Although she didn't know which plane Chichi was calling out in, Yonghua could clearly distinguish that the rhythm of Chichi's calling was the rhythm of her own singing just now. It was exactly the same. At that time, poplar fruit was shocked. Was his daughter that amazing? As a person who had always sung out of tune since childhood, poplar fruit found hope in his daughter. He was a born musician. At only 4 months old, she could grasp the rhythm so accurately. When she grew up, she would definitely become a singer on the same level as Deng Lijun. Chichi was a genius, and young Guo was proud of her. Then, he began to giggle and fantasize about his daughter's appearance on the stage in the future. No matter what the future held, from now on, Poplar Fruit would cultivate Kiki's singing ability. Of course, at this time, Kiki couldn't be considered to be singing. She could only be said to be humming along with Poplar Fruit. In order not to mislead his daughter, Poplar Fruit specially chose some simpler songs, even nursery rhymes. He also secretly hid in the study and practiced with the original singer for a long time. When he felt that he couldn't sing out of tune, he came to play with Kiki. And Kiki also liked this kind of interaction. Every time, she would happily sing along with Poplar Fruit. Towards the end of the song, Kiki was so tired that her little head kept nodding. After all, a baby's energy was still a little lacking. Today, Poplar Fruit and Kiki sang a very classic nursery rhyme, "Only Mommy is Good in the World." The reason why it was a classic was because this song had been sung since Poplar Fruit's parents' generation when they were young. Only Mommy is good in the world. After singing the first line, Poplar Fruit felt that something was wrong. He was the only father in the family now. Where did the mother come from? If this song was remembered by Kiki, what would he do if she didn't call him Daddy but Mommy in the future? And what if she cried and asked him for Mommy in the future when she was sensible? Yes, he couldn't sing like this. Poplar Fruit thought to himself. Kiki's long eyelashes fluttered in confusion as she looked at her father. Why did he stop singing after just one line? Don't worry. Poplar Fruit smiled as he patted Kiki's little head. The hair on her head was so comfortable to touch. He sorted out the lyrics in his heart and removed the word Mommy and replaced it with Daddy. Only Daddy is good in the world. A child with a father is like a treasure. Poplar Fruit sang 2 lines, then stopped and looked at Kiki. Aha! Kiki's eyes flashed. She pouted her little mouth and hummed, "Arth, arth, arth, well sung." Poplar Fruit smiled as he clapped his hands to give Kiki some encouragement. Now singing was a game that Poplar Fruit and Kiki played every day. Every day after taking a bath, when the sun was setting, Poplar Fruit would take her to the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. They would wave their little hands and sing slowly. The setting sun seeped in through the gaps between the green wisteria on the balcony. Accompanied by Chichi's light singing voice that resembled the song of a cuckoo, it slowly flowed over the father and daughter pair. The warm air was filled with a faint fragrance. He thought that after a few weekends, he would continue his daily life like this. But in the evening, his friend, Arfong, knocked on his door and told him that his cousin's school team wanted to invite Poplar Fruit and Uncle Jin to play basketball this weekend. Poplar Fruit was willing. It would be very interesting to be able to play with a master. But except for him, everyone else had work. He couldn't guarantee whether they would be free. So Poplar Fruit asked Arfong to wait first. Today, Song Jiwen went home and wasn't across the street. He called Song Jiwen first. When he heard that he was playing basketball with the school team of Guangdong University of Technology, Song Jiwen agreed. He said that there was no problem on the weekend. Saturday and Sunday were fine too. Next, he called Uncle Jin. Uncle Jin was also interested in this opportunity as he also liked to play basketball. Uncle Jin told Poplar Fruit that the 3 of them were usually free on the weekend, but it was better to wait for him to confirm. While waiting for Uncle Jin's reply, Arfong said to Poplar Fruit excitedly, "Brother Yang, when you play basketball, can I join your team? I can be a substitute too." For his cousin's school team, Arfong had been admiring it for a long time. He had always regarded Guangdong University of Technology as his goal. He wanted to enter this university through the college entrance examination, then join the school team and compete in the national competition like his brother. Now that he had the opportunity to compete with them, how could he not be excited? Poplar Fruit smiled and patted him on the shoulder. He said, "Don't worry. If we make an appointment to play basketball, you will definitely be one of us." Soon, Uncle Jin called back. His hearty laughter came from the receiver. "Little Yang, I asked the 2 of them. Let's set the date for this Saturday." "This Saturday. Okay, I will let them know." Poplar Fruit put down the phone and nodded at Arfong with a smile. After getting a positive answer, Arfong jumped up excitedly. Chapter 72. Poplar Fruit made an appointment with the Guangdong University of Technology school team to play basketball. He was looking forward to the weekend. When he went out to exercise in the morning, he even brought along a basketball to play a few rounds. He felt like he was sharpening his knife for the game. However, before the weekend came, he received a call from Yin Yang Network. The person who called was the same customer service lady from Yin Yang Network. When he picked up the phone, Poplar Fruit's heart was beating wildly. "Mr. Poplar Fruit, first of all, I would like to congratulate you. You have successfully passed our last round of assessment." The customer service lady's voice was very excited. She paused for a moment, but Poplar Fruit was already in ecstasy. "Did I really succeed?" Poplar Fruit could not believe his ears. Although his translation ability was one of the best in Cinder Company, he had never translated any books. His works had never been tested by the market. Yet, he had passed 3 rounds and defeated hundreds of people to successfully become the translator of sect leader Qiao's biography. It was amazing. Although Poplar Fruit was very confident in his own ability, it felt so good to be recognized by others. This was probably the closest he had ever been to his idol. Poplar Fruit did not know what to say. The customer service lady continued, "In other words, you have been selected as one of the translators of Steve Jobs' biography. Next, we need you to sign a translation contract with us and a new confidentiality contract." "Wait, please wait," Poplar Fruit interrupted the customer service lady. He frowned and asked, "That's not right. Did you just say one of the translators? Could it be that there are other interpreters besides me?" The customer service lady flipped through the form in her hand and replied, "Yes, Mr. Poplar Fruit. There are a total of 4 translators selected. Do you have any questions about the results?" "Of course I do," Poplar Fruit roared in his heart. It was fine if there were not only 1 translator, but 4 translators for 1 book. What was going on? Poplar Fruit did not believe in team translation the most. In the past, when he was in university, he had also done a similar project. A few people would translate a document together. In the end, when they saw the expression on the teacher's face when he gave them marks, it was really difficult. Now that he thought about it, that translation could really be thrown into the water. The first problem with team translation was that the level of the people working together would be uneven, so there would be a big gap in the translation after the summary. Of course, this time, there were so many people for Dongshin Publishing and Yaoyang to choose from, so there probably wouldn't be too much of a difference. Secondly, every translator's translation style is different. Some prefer to be more straightforward, while others prefer to be more scholarly. Some prefer to change the style of the original text, while others prefer to use the author's method of expression. Some translate with a strong accent, while others prefer to use an easy-to-understand language style, and so on. There are many more. These differences are common. It is not only caused by different language education, but also related to everyone's preferences. Translator's notes, 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 translator's notes. Poplar Fruit asked in confusion, "Why 4 translators?" The customer service girl explained, "Because this book needs to be translated for a lot of words, and time is tight. It needs the cooperation of multiple translators to complete it." "That won't do," Poplar Fruit shook his head. "Can't I do it alone? I'm very fast at translating." Sorry, Mr. Poplar Fruit, I don't have the right to make such a decision. This project is really important, and we can't be careless. You can think about it again. In fact, 4 translators are also very good. You don't have to work so hard. Everyone can work together to complete such a book that is destined to attract the attention of the whole country. What a sense of achievement. Right. The customer service girl tried to persuade Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment, but he still couldn't convince himself. He said to the customer service girl, "How about this? You report to the higher-ups and tell them what I think. I think that's such a good book. If 4 translators work together to translate it, the final result may not be satisfactory. If they still decide to use 4 translators in the end, I'm willing to withdraw from this project, although this project is really important to me. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit lay on the sofa and sighed deeply. If he couldn't do his best, he didn't want to be involved and become a member of the team that destroyed it. Poplar Fruit didn't know that his phone call caused a huge debate at Dongshin Publishing. Several chief editors and associate editors even slammed the table and argued. These things happened thousands of miles away. Poplar Fruit only knew that the next morning, when he came back from exercising and bought breakfast, he saw a woman standing in front of his house. A very handsome woman. She looked to be in her mid-20s. She had short hair with neat bangs and a clean and flawless oval face. Her facial features looked a little delicate with light makeup on. She was also dressed very fashionably. Her black leather jacket and skinny jeans matched her very individuality. At first glance, she was the representative of a fashionable woman in the city. Beautiful was ashamed in front of her. The word handsome was even more appropriate to describe a man. However, Poplar Fruit had never seen such a woman before. She was holding a Gucci bag in one hand and a suitcase in the other. What was she doing standing in front of his house? Poplar Fruit looked at her confusedly as he carried the porridge, buns, and basketball and walked over. The woman looked at Poplar Fruit with vigilance. Then she put down the suitcase with her right hand and took out her iPhone from the bag. She opened the screen and looked at it. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" Poplar Fruit scratched his hair that was wet with sweat and asked. "This is Jinli District Apartment, Block 13, Room 503, right?" Her accent had a strong Beijing accent. "Yes. My home." Poplar Fruit nodded and said. "You are Poplar Fruit?" The woman compared the phone in her hand and asked. Poplar Fruit frowned. He thought, could it be that she met a salesperson? Even his name had been thoroughly investigated. But that's not right. I've never seen a salesperson with a Gucci bag. He also felt that the woman in front of him, who was not even as tall as his shoulder, was not a threat. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "Yes, I am Poplar Fruit. May I ask who you are?" The woman's face finally relaxed. She stretched out her right hand gracefully and said, "Great, I finally found you. I am the deputy chief editor of Dongshin Publishing. My name is Zhang Yujie." Oh. It turned out that she was from Dongshin. Poplar Fruit suddenly realized. He was also surprised. He had just expressed his attitude yesterday. Why did someone come today? He looked at Zhang Yujie's right hand, smiled awkwardly and said, "Miss Zhang, let's wait a moment. You see, I have so many things now, and I am sweating all over. Let's go in and talk." Zhang Yujie smiled indifferently, then stepped back. Poplar Fruit hurried to open the door. The two of them were almost standing together. Zhang Yujie could only feel the strong masculine smell of Poplar Fruit. She blushed and stepped back quickly. Poplar Fruit opened the door and let Zhang Yujie in. He put the breakfast on the table and asked, "Miss Zhang, did you come from Beijing?" "Yes, I arrived early this morning." Zhang Yujie stood in the living room and looked at the decorations in the house. "You didn't fly here just for me, did you?" Yongguo joked. "It's all because of you." Zhang Yujie glanced at him and said with a little dissatisfaction, "I also took the midnight flight." Well, it was true. Poplar Fruit was a little flattered. Although the woman in front of him looked a little young, according to her, she was the deputy chief editor of a publishing house. Poplar Fruit was touched by her attitude and the importance she attached to him that made a deputy chief editor fly across half of China overnight to find him. Well, of course, he was a little skeptical. This kind of thing sounded a little mysterious. Zhang Yujie turned her head and saw a little doubt in Poplar Fruit's eyes. She handed her business card to Poplar Fruit and said, "See, I didn't lie to you, right?" There was a little dissatisfaction in her tone. She was a little rude. Poplar Fruit didn't mind. He took the business card and looked at it. The card was beautifully made with golden thread. It really did have the address of Dongshin Publishing and her title. It should be real. However, it was the first time he saw such a young deputy chief editor. From the way she spoke, it felt like she was a person with an unruly personality. Maybe she was the daughter of an official. If that was the case, then it made sense. However, Poplar Fruit didn't want to delve into it, so he didn't ask. Miss Zheng, have you eaten breakfast? Poplar Fruit asked. Not yet. I'm starving. Do you have fried dough sticks and soy milk? Zhang Yujie sat down at the table and looked at the breakfast Poplar Fruit bought. This person really didn't treat herself as a guest. Poplar Fruit was just asking politely, but she just sat down. Well, who told me to be hospitable? Poplar Fruit answered honestly, no, there's only steamed buns and congee with century egg and pork. She was disappointed and said, only steamed buns and congee? I don't like them. Then, she put one hand on the table and held her cheek. She tilted her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, do you want me to cook noodles for you? You're from the north, so you should be used to eating noodles, right? It's okay, as long as you don't cook instant noodles for me, Zhang Yujie said with a smile. Thus, Poplar Fruit took out a tomato and an egg from the fridge and cooked a bowl of noodles for Zhang Yujie. The red shredded tomato and white and yellow egg floats on top of the soup. It looked delicious. Poplar Fruit washed a pair of clean chopsticks and brought it over. Miss Zhang, I'm sorry. You came in a hurry and didn't prepare anything delicious. I can only treat you to noodles. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. It's okay, I ate too much noodles. Zhang Yujie picked up the chopsticks and smelled the tomato and egg noodles. It was too fragrant. When she lived outside in the past, she didn't cook noodles that smelled so good. What? Poplar Fruit sat opposite her and took the bowl. He seemed to have heard her say something about being old. He raised his head and asked in confusion. Nothing, nothing. Zhang Yujie was too engrossed in watching Poplar Fruit cook noodles that she didn't pay attention and exposed her manly nature. She smiled awkwardly and quickly covered it up. Oh, it's delicious. Zhang Yujie picked up the noodles with her chopsticks and ate it. It was so smooth that she almost didn't need to chew. It tasted as good as shark fin noodles. Eat slowly, eat slowly. Poplar Fruit chewed on a steamed bun and looked at Zhang Yujie with a smile. Then, he handed her a spoon. Chapter 73. Poplar Fruit ate much faster than Zhang Yujie. After all, the noodles had just been cooked, and the soup was still steaming hot. After eating, Poplar Fruit stood up and put the bag in the trash can. He said, Miss Zheng, take your time to eat. I'm going to take a shower. Zhang Yujie didn't have time to pay attention to him. She was busy devouring the food in front of her. She really didn't treat herself as a guest. Poplar Fruit scratched his head awkwardly. He couldn't do anything about her, so he went back to his room to get a change of clothes. When he came out, Poplar Fruit was still careful. He locked the door of the bedroom where Kiki was sleeping and walked into the bathroom with the key. I'm full. A few minutes later, Zhang Yujie put down the big bowl and chopsticks. Then she sat on the chair with satisfaction and sighed. It's so delicious. I didn't expect a man to have such good cooking skills. I really couldn't tell. She didn't even let go of the soup just now. The whole bowl was licked clean by her like a kitten eating food. But after a while, Zhang Yujie frowned and touched her small belly. She said to herself, oh, what should I do? I seem to have eaten too much. I must be overweight today. No, I'm going to get fat again. It's all that damn Poplar Fruit's fault. Why did he make it so delicious? After saying that, she slammed the table with hatred, as if Poplar Fruit was the culprit. Then she became discouraged and muttered, no, I can't beat him. He's so tall. It's not scientific for a southerner to look like this. I'm already 1.7 meters tall, but I only reach his chest. Recalling the masculine scent of Poplar Fruit at the door, Zhang Yujie's cheeks turned a little red. She pretended to be shy as she covered her hot cheeks and said to herself, it's not like I haven't seen a handsome guy before. Little Jie, why do you blush so easily? Suddenly, the sound of a baby crying came from the bedroom. The sound was so loud that even Zhang Yujie, who was separated by a door and a living room, could hear it clearly. Hey, what's going on? Zhang Yujie stood up in confusion and took 2 steps forward. Why is there a child's voice? Could it be a ringtone? Right away, Daddy will be here soon. Poplar Fruit's voice came from the bathroom. Bang! The bathroom door was pulled open. Poplar Fruit put on his shirt and rushed out impatiently. When he rushed through the living room, he almost collided with Zhang Yujie. Sorry. Poplar Fruit rushed into the bedroom without looking back. He turned the key and opened the door and walked in. Although it was just a glimpse, Zhang Yujie still saw Poplar Fruit's exposed upper body. His thick and powerful chest muscles and well-defined 8-pack abs almost blinded Zhang Yujie's eyes. Poplar Fruit was different from the muscular men she saw in the gym. He was not so thick and strong. When he wore clothes, people would misunderstand him as a tall scholar. His muscles were the kind that didn't show off under his clothes, but if he took them off, they were very beautiful. My daughter would be dazzled. Coupled with his height of about 187 meters and long legs, even Zhang Yujie, who had seen a lot in the gym, couldn't help but cover her mouth to prevent herself from screaming. Poplar Fruit had already walked out with Kiki in his arms. Kiki, who had just woken up and didn't see her father, was now in a daze. Her eyelashes were stained with morning dew. Her tear-stained face was very pitiful. "Don't cry, Kiki. Isn't Daddy here? Why are you crying again?" Poplar Fruit coaxed. He gently wiped away the tears on Kiki's face with his left hand. Although she was no longer crying, Kiki still felt a little wronged and confused. She curled her hands in front of her and burrowed her little head into her father's neck. She twisted and turned, especially relying on the smell of her father's body. Seeing that there was another child in the room, Zhang Yujie's eyes widened. She finally understood what the small rocking chair in the room was all about. It wasn't an ornament. That's not right. Didn't his profile say that he was 24 years old and unmarried? Zhang Yujie was confused. "Poplar Fruit," Zhang Yujie asked hesitantly. "This is..." Poplar Fruit raised his head and smiled. "This is my daughter, Kiki." Zhang Yujie only felt a large herd of alpacas running through her heart. "Why were all the good men in the world married?" She said embarrassedly. "What about your wife? Will she misunderstand if I'm here?" Poplar Fruit was stunned. He smiled and said, No, I'm not married. How can I have a wife?" Seeing that Zhang Yujie's eyes were even more confused, Poplar Fruit could only briefly explain his situation. Every time he met someone, he would have to say it once. Poplar Fruit felt that he could prepare a set of speeches and recite it every time. "So that's how it is." Zhang Yujie suddenly understood. She praised in her heart, "What a man who dares to take responsibility. It's a pity. Little Jie, you're in love again." While Poplar Fruit was making milk powder for Kiki, Zhang Yujie visited Poplar Fruit's study. Like Du and Xueqing, she was also shocked by the number of foreign language books in Poplar Fruit's study. French, German, Spanish, Portuguese. Looking at Mama's notes, Zhang Yujie could be sure that these books were not placed there to fool people, but that the owner had really read them. Although Zhang Yujie didn't learn languages, she had learned how difficult it was to master a foreign language when she studied English in college for the CET4 and CET6 exams. Looking at the 4 foreign language books on Poplar Fruit's desk, Zhang Yujie began to worship Poplar Fruit. Zhang Yujie also saw a lot of books on translation theory. She nodded in her heart. "He's so hardworking. No wonder he's so good at it. I really came to the right place this time. But will he accept my proposal?" Zhang Yujie was a little uncertain about this. As the deputy chief editor of Dongshin Publishing, she had also come into contact with some of the leading figures in the academic world. She found that although they were usually very amiable, they had their own persistence in their own professional fields. It could even be said that they were stubborn. Although Poplar Fruit was not a leading figure, he was still a very talented person. Would he be as stubborn as them? When everyone sat down, Zhang Yujie stopped dawdling and went straight to the point. "Poplar Fruit, I'm here this time to personally persuade you to join our project team," Zhang Yujie said. "Well, I understand what you mean, but I actually made it very clear yesterday. Either I do it alone, or I have to quit. With 4 people, it really affects the quality of the translation." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said. Zhang Yujie twisted her body and said with a frown, "You know that's impossible. To be honest, we received a notice from the foreign copyright owner a few days ago. Our publishing angle has been set for November 21st this year. It's completely impossible for one person to finish a book with more than 500,000 words. Poplar Fruit thought about it. 500,000 words, 2 months. It was indeed impossible for one person to finish it. Even if he translated day and night for a month, he estimated that he could only translate 200,000 words. After all, this was a literary work. It was not an ordinary technical document. The difficulty was more than 3 times higher. It was at least 5 times higher. He shook his head and said, "It's really impossible. I can only say sorry. I really don't want 4 people to read it together. You'd better find someone else." Zheng Yujie did not want to give up. She continued stubbornly, "Why are you so stubborn? Didn't you want this opportunity very much? It's so rare. How can you give up just like that?" "I used to think so, but the situation is different now," Poplar Fruit said. "I don't want such an important book to be ruined in my hands. I'll be scolded in return. But you want others to ruin it." Zheng Yujie stared at Poplar Fruit and said, "How can you be so irresponsible?" Poplar Fruit's expression froze. There was a chance. Zheng Yujie saw a crack appear on Poplar Fruit's solid wall. She quickly struck the iron while it was hot and said, "Think about it. You valued this book so much before. It was written by a master appointed by Steve Jobs, and it was the only biography authorized by him. Do you have the heart to destroy it by making everyone translate a translation that you can't even read? You have to know that you once had the chance to save it. Are you willing to stand by and do nothing?" Poplar Fruit frowned and said, "So what? If I don't stand by and do nothing, am I going to be the executioner myself? You can do your best to make us do better," Zheng Yujie said. "What do you mean?" Zheng Yujie smiled. She kept him in suspense and said, "Do you know why I came to you personally?" "Why?" Poplar Fruit had always been curious about this question. "Because you were the first of all the selected translators, because your translation was the only one that could impress all the judges, because only your article made me want to buy it. Do you know? Because of these reasons, I slammed the table and quarreled with my boss yesterday. I don't want anyone else, but I want you." When Zheng Yujie said this, she realized the ambiguity in her last sentence, and her face turned slightly red. "Anyway, that's what I meant, so I flew here from Beijing overnight," Zheng Yujie said. Her words touched Poplar Fruit, but it didn't solve the problem. Poplar Fruit said, "And then? What are you going to do? Don't talk about giving up. Come and help me. I can give you the highest authority. I'll let you be the team leader and consultant of the 4-person translation team. You can do your best to read as many manuscripts as you can. I can also let you do the final touches on the other people's manuscripts. If you feel that something is not right, you can modify it according to your own ideas. What do you think?" Zheng Yujie had thrown away her trump card this time. If Poplar Fruit didn't give in, she didn't know what to do. Under Zheng Yujie's gaze, Poplar Fruit widened his eyes and said, "Are you sure? Don't you think you've given him too much authority? Can it really work?" It was more than just too much. It was as if the whole project was handed over to Poplar Fruit to handle. Zheng Yujie nodded quickly and said, "At present, I'm fully in charge of this book. My words count." Zheng Yujie was indeed the descendant of an official, and her family background wasn't simple. She became the deputy editor at the age of 26. Her family elders contributed a lot, but this also caused her to be questioned by everyone in the publishing house. This was the first time she was leading a team on a project. It was also her chance to prove herself. In order to keep Poplar Fruit, she didn't hesitate to fly overnight from Beijing to Yangcheng. In order to do her best, she didn't hesitate to give most of her authority to Poplar Fruit. This time, she had to let everyone see her in a new light. I, Zheng Yujie, wasn't a second-generation official who only knew how to rely on connections. Poplar Fruit thought for a long time. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked into Zheng Yujie's eyes. He said seriously, "If it's really as you say, I accept." Zheng Yujie was overjoyed. She took out a contract from her bag and said with a smile, "Okay, sign it." Chapter 74. After signing the contract, Poplar Fruit thought that he was going to send Zheng Yujie back on the plane. He didn't expect her to stuff the contract into her bag and start playing with her phone on the sofa. Miss Zheng, aren't you in a hurry to go back? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked. Aya, don't call me Miss Zheng. It sounds so unfamiliar. Since we're so close, why don't you call me Yujie? Zheng Yujie turned over and looked at Poplar Fruit while lying on the sofa. Her buttocks were wrapped in jeans, showing amazing curves, round and elastic. So familiar, what do you mean by so familiar? They've only known each other for less than 2 hours. Are they familiar? Although he was cursing in his heart, Poplar Fruit could only call out honestly, Yujie, aren't you in charge of this project? Why aren't you in a hurry to go back? Yujie, what's the name? Why does it sound like Sister You? And like Sister You. Isn't that so? Hehe, no hurry. I'll go back tomorrow. When I ran out, I already made arrangements for them. Since it's the weekend, there aren't many things to do. Just treat it as a vacation. Zheng Yujie rolled her eyes and stared at Poplar Fruit's handsome face and said, Little Fruit, do you not welcome me? How could that be? Ha, ha ha. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and laughed dryly. The lady in front of him really didn't treat him as an outsider. Moreover, she had the intention of taking over his place. Poplar Fruit was reduced to being addressed as a eunuch. Alright, Poplar Fruit could only go back and do his own things according to his plan. As for Zheng Yujie, she could do whatever she wanted. But not long after, Zheng Yujie followed him to Poplar Fruit's study like a shadow. She was like a curious baby, asking questions. Hey, little Guozzi, did you really learn so many languages? Hey, little Fruit, did you write all the notes in this book? Hey, little Fruit, why are you so good at reading? Did you eat some great recovery pill? Hey, little Fruit, what are you doing now? Poplar Fruit was annoyed. His mood was like the Monkey King in Journey to the West. He really wanted to get rid of this fly who was buzzing around like a monk. But he couldn't. He still had to accompany her and answer her questions. Who told him to sign a contract to sell himself to her? The world really wasn't peaceful. Yang Guo's face was covered in tears. During lunchtime, Song Jiwen's family study. Poplar Fruit, who's that woman? He couldn't stand it anymore, so he couldn't stand it any longer. He couldn't stand to the end of it to Zheng's, who's that woman outside? Zheng's, who? After you broke up with your ex, the woman at home kept coming over. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What's that? She's my boss. Boss, do you understand? She came from Beijing yesterday to sign a contract with me. She flew from Beijing to sign a contract with you? Is there such a boss? Song Jiwen looked at Poplar Fruit from head to toe and said, I think you've become more handsome. Didn't you see the way that woman looks at you? I think she's here for you. That's not true. She just met me for the first time this morning. Don't talk nonsense. Otherwise, it'll be bad if I can't get off the stage. Poplar Fruit said. Anyway, take it easy. But the woman outside looks good. She's got character. You can consider her. Really. Ouch. Before Song Jiwen could finish his words, he was kicked out by Poplar Fruit. After lunch, Song Jiwen spent 2 hours to pick up Kitten from Shoshan District. Because there was a game in the afternoon, Poplar Fruit had to ask her to take care of Kiki. Hearing that Poplar Fruit was going to play basketball, Zheng Yujie followed him with great interest. Holding a big purple umbrella, she and Kitten pushed Kiki to sit on the bench next to the court. When they arrived, the 5 members of the school team of Guangdong University of Technology were already waiting there. Uncle Jin and our phone brought them in. Before the game started, they were all warming up for the relay layup. Seeing Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen coming over, and Ziming also came up to them and introduced them. Brothers, this is Poplar Fruit, and this is his brother, Song Jiwen. Poplar Fruit, Jiwen, this is my captain, Deng Jian, and our team's members, Zhong Jie, Qiu Xin, and Dong Xiaofang. And Ziming introduced the team members standing together one by one. Poplar Fruit reached out and shook hands with Deng Jian. He smiled and said, Nice to meet you. Before Deng Jian could speak, Dong Xiaofang, who was a little taller than Poplar Fruit, interrupted and said, Poplar Fruit, I heard from Brother Ming that you are very good. We must learn from each other later. Deng Jian hit him on the head and said with a smile, You little brat, are you trying to steal my limelight? Poplar Fruit, don't mind him. Our team members are a little straightforward. They speak frankly, but they mean no harm. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, It's okay. I like people who speak frankly. When the three uncles arrived, Poplar Fruit, Song Jiwen, Ah Feng, and the three uncles gathered in one half of the court to warm up and discuss tactics. The opposite side is a little tall. This game is going to be difficult, Uncle Dao said with a serious face. Except for Poplar Fruit, the rest of their team was less than 1.8 meters tall. On the opposite side, the 5 people were all more than 1.8 meters tall, and 3 of them, Deng Jian, and Ziming, and Dong Xiaofang, were taller than Poplar Fruit. Deng Jian was estimated to be 1.95 meters tall. Don't worry, we have Poplar Fruit as the inside line, Uncle Jin said with a smile. Poplar Fruit also said with a fire in his eyes, That's right. Look at me for the rebound. Let's discuss how to play, Uncle Jin said. Let's assign who will play which positions. Song Jiwen said, I think we shouldn't be fixed with only one point guard, because their basic skills are definitely better than ours. With only one person controlling the ball, it's easy to be robbed. That's right. Jiwen, why don't you and Aban play the double point guard? Uncle Jin said with appreciation. Uncle Dao smiled and said, I can only play outside. I can't get inside. If you see me run to an empty spot, then pass the ball to me. Uncle Dao's shooting was as accurate as a scalpel. If he could hit a few more, it would be easier to play. I'm a substitute. I can play outside. Ah Feng raised his hand and said. Uncle Jin laughed and said, Don't worry, there will definitely be a chance for you to play. The 3 of us are old bones. We'll probably be exhausted running the whole court. When the time comes, don't complain that there aren't enough substitutes. He turned his head and asked Poplar Fruit, what are you going to do? Are you going to play center? Poplar Fruit pondered for a moment and said, I'll play small forward when I'm on offense and center when I'm on defense. He planned to use himself as James when he was on offense. Facing a school team that was strong in basketball, if others couldn't open it, then he would have to break through. Well, that's good. Then I'll control the inside line with you. Uncle Jin nodded and said, What we're saying now is just a warm-up. The tactics we'll implement later still depends on the strength of the opponents on the court. Poplar Fruit laughed. Yes, we'll just adapt to the situation. Song Jiwen echoed. After the discussion, Poplar Fruit and the others warmed up in their own half of the court, stretching their ligaments to prevent injuries during the whole court run later. At this time, a lot of spectators gathered on the sidelines. Most of them were basketball enthusiasts in the community. They had heard the news from each other. Although there was an empty court next to them, no one went to play. After playing so many times, the basketball players in the community knew that the strongest among them were Poplar Fruit and the other 5. When the 6 of them stood together, they almost replaced everyone in the community. Today, they were going to play the strongest player in the University of Guangdong. How could they be willing to miss such a wonderful game? Before the game began, Deng Jian came over and followed Uncle Jin and Poplar Fruit. He said, Uncle Jin, Poplar Fruit, let's have a meal together after the game. I'm sorry to trouble you on such a hot day. Haha, don't be so polite. It's our honor to play with you, Uncle Jin said with a smile. No, it's necessary to treat. When we play basketball, victory is secondary. Friendship comes first. After the game, having a meal together won't affect your other things, right? Deng Jian deserved to be the captain of the University of Guangdong Polytechnic University. His words and actions made people feel very comfortable. Okay. Uncle Jin looked at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded. He then said, after the game, let's have a meal together. I'll treat you. Don't fight with me. The people here are not poor. You have to pay for it, right? You said that playing basketball is about friendship. If you keep talking about money with me, it will hurt our friendship. Haha. Deng Jian laughed heartily. I won't mention it. Thank you in advance, Uncle Jin. He paused and then said, you also know that we still have to play games after school starts. If we get injured, it will affect the game. So, on the court later, please be merciful. The main thing is that everyone has to have fun. Don't worry, we won't do too much. But you have to be merciful. We are a few old bones, and we can't withstand the vitality of young people like you. Uncle Jin laughed. Well, friendship comes first. Deng Jian clenched his fist and smiled. After he left, Uncle Jin said to Poplar Fruit with emotion, their captain is a character. He has a good family education. It's amazing if he doesn't play basketball in the future. Poplar Fruit looked at Uncle Jin in confusion and asked, why do you say that? What do you think he wanted to say to me just now? Uncle Jin patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and asked with a smile. Didn't he say about the meal? Poplar Fruit frowned and asked. Suddenly, Yang Guo reacted first and said with a sudden realization, oh, I understand. He wants us to not hurt their players when we play basketball. So that's his real purpose. That's right. Uncle Jin nodded approvingly. You understand quite quickly. He just beat around the bush and said so much just to talk about this. But he said it very skillfully, right? You don't feel that it's harsh when you hear it. Poplar Fruit nodded. Indeed, Deng Jian's way of doing things made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. It was easy to feel that he was a very worthy friend. You can learn from his good points. Uncle Jin educated Poplar Fruit like an elder. He smiled and said, someone in his family should be a leader, so he has been influenced by this. His words and actions are very methodical. Well, I understand. Poplar Fruit nodded solemnly. This was just a small interlude. Both sides were ready. Poplar Fruit and Deng Jian walked to the center circle to prepare for the jump ball. An uncle, who was acting as a guest referee, walked to the center with the basketball. The audience on the sidelines held their breaths and looked at them nervously. The battle was about to start. Chapter 75. Deng Jian's position on the school team was actually not the center, but the point guard. There were some players on the school team who were taller than him. However, the only center on the court, Zhong Jie, was not as tall as Poplar Fruit, so he was the one who played the jump ball. Although Poplar Fruit was half a head shorter than Deng Jian did not dare to relax at all. He had heard from Enchanting about Poplar Fruit's abnormal jump. With a whistle, the referee threw the basketball high into the air, and the game began. So what if he is 10 centimeters taller than me? Poplar Fruit confidently jumped more than a meter high, and under Deng Jian's surprised gaze, the basketball was in Uncle Ban's hands. Although Deng Jian was mentally prepared, he was still shocked by Poplar Fruit's jump. The highest point of his jump was actually 2 palms higher than him. What a monster! Before Deng Jian landed on the ground, he shouted, "Defend!" Poplar Fruit did not need to shout. Several of his teammates had already rushed to the opponent's half of the court. However, the quick attack did not succeed. After all, the opponent was the school team of Guangdong University of Technology. Seeing that the fight for the ball was not going well, the 3 players who had retreated early had already formed a defensive formation. Uncle Ban's idea of scoring quickly was extinguished. Since the quick attack was not going to work, they would play positional play. Uncle Ban saw that someone was closing in on him, so he passed the ball to Song Jiwen to control. At this time, the others returned to their positions. Poplar Fruit also stood outside the 3-second zone to provide support. Song Jiwen dribbled the ball twice. Seeing that he could not fool Qiu Xin, who was guarding him, he passed the ball to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was ready to attack with the ball, but from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Dong Xiaofang, who had just guarded Uncle Ban, running over to attack him with Enchanting. Poplar Fruit was happy. Taking the initiative to leave the ball? Alright, I'll fulfill your wishes. Without waiting for Deng Jian to realize that something was wrong, Poplar Fruit acted like he was protecting the ball for a layup. He placed his right hand on the side of his body and squeezed Enchanting into the lane, looking like he was going to make a layup. Dong Xiaofang and Enchanting hurriedly used their 4 hands to form a big hat on Poplar Fruit's head. However, they discovered that Poplar Fruit's right hand was empty. Where was the ball? When he turned around, he saw that Uncle Dao had already received the basketball. He calmly made a 45-degree jump shot, and the basketball steadily went into the basket. Team Genie scored first. The crowd cheered. They had seen Poplar Fruit's feint clearly. That pass without looking behind to deceive the two opponents was just too cool. Kitten also stood up and clapped desperately. Only Zhang Yujie, who didn't know much about basketball, was a little confused. Beautiful pass. Uncle Dao gave Poplar Fruit a thumbs up. Poplar Fruit also gave him a thumbs up and said, "Beautiful shot too." Although they were talking, they didn't stay idle. They quickly retreated with the rest of the team. They didn't have much experience in games, but they still understood that it was important to switch between offense and defense quickly in a game. Dong Xiaofang ran to the end line with an embarrassed look on his face. He passed the ball into the hands of Deng Jian, who was still staring at him. He didn't need to be scolded by the captain. He also understood that he had missed the ball. It was the school team's turn to attack. Deng Jian acted as the point guard. Song Jiwen, who was guarding him, looked helpless. Deng Jian was too tall. Song Jiwen was only about 1.75 meters tall, which was 20 centimeters shorter than Deng Jian. As long as Deng Jian raised his hand, he couldn't touch the ball at all. Poplar Fruit also saw his friend's predicament. He stood near the lane and shouted, "Mosquito, just interfere with his shooting. If he wants to break through, let him in." However, Deng Jian passed the ball to Dong Xiaofang. Dong Xiaofang, who was eager to make up for his mistakes, started to juggle in front of Mr. Dao. All kinds of elegant and strange dribbling movements dazzled Mr. Dao. The audience couldn't help but applaud for his opponent. Dong Xiaofang's two feints deceived Mr. Dao. He left Mr. Dao 2 body positions behind and then stopped for a jump shot. His shot was much more difficult than Mr. Dao's. This kind of rapid breaking and jumping up required a lot of knees. However, Dong Xiaofang was able to control these movements very well. His shot also went in. The defense wasn't good enough. They could only attack. Poplar Fruit passed the ball to Song Jiwen and then quickly ran to the opponent's half of the court. There was still no way to make a fast attack. The opponent had already retreated and stood in position. Song Jiwen was helpless against Deng Jian's defense. He had to pass the ball to Mr. Ban and let him control the ball. Then he ran with Mr. Dao. Deng Jian didn't follow. Instead, he gestured for Qiu Xin and the others to switch at any time. In a one-on-one match, their strength was generally stronger than Song Jiwen and Mr. Dao. The effect was the same no matter who was guarding. But was it really like this? In one run, Song Jiwen squeezed Dong Xiaofang and ran to an empty spot. Qiu Xin was about to switch over when he suddenly found that he hit a wall. He looked up and saw that it was Poplar Fruit. When did he run over? Even Enziming didn't notice Poplar Fruit's block. This was just the tacit understanding between Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen after many years of playing. Mr. Ban just passed the ball over. Song Jiwen received the ball, took 2 more steps inside, and then shot. The basketball grazed the white line of the backboard and then refracted into the frame. "Cheer up," Deng Jian said to his teammates as he dribbled the ball to the opponent's half of the court. He was very dissatisfied with the coordination of his opponents twice. Dong Xiaofang's point could completely turn Mr. Dao into a sieve, but Deng Jian didn't continue to let Dong Xiaofang attack. He made a move to lure Song Jiwen to jump, and then easily bypassed Song Jiwen and slanted into the inside line. Poplar Fruit came up to meet him, and the two people collided solidly. Muscles and muscles made a dull collision sound. Deng Jian was shocked. He was completely at a disadvantage in the wrestling with Poplar Fruit. The moment they collided, he felt like he had hit a mountain. Poplar Fruit didn't move, but he staggered back a step. However, after all, Deng Jian was experienced. When he retreated, he made an incredible move. He passed the basketball through Poplar Fruit's crotch, hit the ground, and the ball fell into Zhong Jie's hands. His crotch was pierced. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to be depressed. Zhong Jie, with his huge strength advantage, successfully squeezed past the community team's second inside uncle, and then scored with a hook. Poplar Fruit's team scored a lot, but it seemed that the opponents had an easier time scoring. Except for Poplar Fruit, the others were almost destroyed when they faced off. Song Jiwen and Deng Jian, needless to say, the gap was too big. Mr. Dao was up against Dong Xiaofang. Dong Xiaofang's speed and flexibility were completely unable to keep up with Uncle Dao's age. As long as Dong Xiaofang wanted to break through, Mr. Dao couldn't stop him at all. On the outside line, Mr. Ban was up against Qiu Xin. Mr. Ban wasn't the main attacker, and neither was Qiu Xin, but it seemed that Qiu Xin had a better chance of winning. After all, Mr. Ban was Poplar Fruit's weakest link. Mr. Dao was not as tall as Zhong Jie, and even his strength, which he was most proud of, was far behind. Zhong Jie was a strength maniac, and probably only Poplar Fruit could compete with him. Finally, there was Poplar Fruit and Enzyming. The two of them had fought last time. Although Poplar Fruit was better than Enzyming, his strength was only 10% or 20% higher. It seemed that it was difficult to make up for the gap created by the others. Although the score was the same now, as long as Poplar Fruit's team didn't score when they attacked, the score would definitely be pulled apart. That's right, such a situation had already happened. In a new round of attack, Mr. Dao ran out of space again, but Dong Xiaofang rushed over to interfere. Mr. Dao couldn't shoot, and Poplar Fruit, who had just run outside to block, couldn't get the rebound. When it came to defense, the community team couldn't stop Mr. Dao at all. Mr. Dao was shaken off by Dong Xiaofang again, and again, he made a jump shot, and the community team fell behind by 2 points. In another round, Mr. Dao couldn't get the hook under the basket with Poplar Fruit's help to block Zhong Jie. Poplar Fruit got the rebound, but when he passed to the outside, he made a mistake. Dong Xiaofang appeared like lightning and intercepted Poplar Fruit's pass. They immediately attacked quickly. Deng Jian, who was far ahead, received a long pass from Dong Xiaofang. After crossing the free throw line, he took 3 steps, jumped high, and dunked with both hands. Song Jiwen couldn't keep up with Deng Jian's footsteps. He could only watch from behind as his clothes fluttered in the air. Although it was someone else who scored, Deng Jian's domineering dunk with both hands was too explosive. Suddenly, it ignited the enthusiasm of both the court and the audience, and all of them applauded. Even Poplar Fruit couldn't help but sigh. The opponent's morale was completely stimulated by this dunk. Sure enough, in the next 5 minutes, Poplar Fruit's team was almost beaten to the point that they couldn't fight back. Except for Poplar Fruit, the other 4 were all beaten into sieves. On the offensive side, except for Mr. Dao, who made a 2-point shot, and Poplar Fruit, who made a 3-point shot during the fast attack, the others were all silenced. This included Mr. Dao, mainly because Dong Xiaofang interfered with him too much. He was the kind of player who could score when no one was guarding him, and he could only rely on luck when there was someone guarding him. With interference, it was normal that he couldn't score. With a score of 20-9, Poplar Fruit's team had to call for a timeout. Although there were less than 3 minutes before half-time, they played 2 10-minute first and second halves. They couldn't be bombarded like this. If it went on like this, they would directly surrender without playing in the second half. Off the court, Feng politely handed them towels and mineral water. Mr. Ban, who was desperately drinking water, suddenly said, "Feng, you can play for me later." Everyone looked at Uncle Ban in surprise. He smiled and explained while panting, "Our Feng is better than me. With him around, you guys will have an extra point to score goals. Besides, I'm tired from running around just now. I'm old, and I can't take it after playing for so long." He and Song Jiwen could be said to be the 2 most tired people on the court. Every time they retreated, because they were on the outside, in order to not let the opponent's fast attack, they had to rush back to their positions desperately. When they attacked, they also had to spend energy to control the ball. After all, Song Jiwen was young and could still hold on, but Mr. Ban looked at him sweating like rain. He really couldn't hold on for long. Mr. Dao nodded and said, "Okay, Mr. Ban, you can take a break off the court now. In the second half, we'll probably have to replace you when we're tired." Mr. Dao said, "Feng, come up. Why don't you let Feng defend against their Dong Xiaofang? Feng's footsteps are faster, and he'll probably defend better than me." It shouldn't be a problem for me to defend against that Chiozine. Ah Feng agreed. That's a good suggestion. Let's do it. Mr. Dao then turned his head and said, Xiao Yang, you see the situation later. If there's no particularly good opportunity, don't pass the ball when you're attacking. You can play as much as possible. As you can see, on our side, probably only you can open it. Poplar Fruit nodded with a solemn expression. Now, he was the district team's spear. Whether they could tear apart the opponent's impregnable defense depended on him. Chapter 76. When the game started again, Ah Feng served the ball from the center line to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit dribbled the ball and walked to the top of the three-point line. The others pulled him away. Even Uncle Jin retreated to the corner. Below the stage, Zhang Yujie nervously held onto her umbrella. She had already stood up to cheer for Yang Guo a few times, but she still couldn't turn the tide. Seeing Poplar Fruit having such a hard time, she was secretly worried even though she didn't know much about basketball. His teammates pulled their opponents away. Only Enzyming was left in front of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit looked at Enzyming, who was half-bent and had tense muscles. He dribbled the ball twice and suddenly started to move. With the ball in his right hand, he broke through to Enzyming's left side. Enzyming didn't move at first. He judged that Poplar Fruit might be faking it. But his judgment was wrong. Poplar Fruit really squeezed to his left side. Seeing that he was about to be broken through, Enzyming quickly followed. He knew how fast Poplar Fruit was after he started. So, in order to catch up with Poplar Fruit, he almost gritted his teeth and rushed back with all his strength. He caught up. Enzyming was overjoyed. He couldn't believe it because he knew that his speed was not on the same level as Poplar Fruit. Yes, he really shouldn't believe it because Poplar Fruit was just luring him to catch up. Before he could get close, Poplar Fruit suddenly retreated. With one back and forth, the two of them instantly pulled apart the distance between them. Poplar Fruit just calmly flicked his wrist and threw the basketball out. It almost didn't even jump. When the basketball fell from the net, Enzyming just managed to stabilize his body. He didn't give the others time to react and defend. Brother Yang is beautiful. Little Kitten in the audience applauded desperately. Zhang Yujie, who didn't know how to appreciate it, was a little confused and asked, "Why are you so excited? Aren't there still a lot of points to go?" That's because Brother Yang's step-back shot was very nice. In fact, the score doesn't matter. Playing against the school team of Guangdong University of Technology, they are already prepared to lose. Kitten explained. Is the school team of Guangdong University of Technology very good? As a child who grew up in Beijing, Zheng Yujie had never heard of such a name. She only knew two famous universities in Guangdong province. She asked in confusion, who is better, they or the Huaran team? Huaran team? What Huaran team? Kitten asked in confusion. Beijing Huaran team? Haven't you heard of it? My brother and sister are their fans, Zhang Yujie said. I'm going to faint. Are you talking about the Beijing Huaran team that plays soccer? Kitten patted his forehead exaggeratedly and asked speechlessly. A soccer player? Ah, all right. Let's watch the match. Zhang Yujie laughed awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. While they were talking, the school team made another attack. Their captain passed the ball to Dong Xiaofang. This time, Dong Xiaofang encountered Ah Feng, who was guarding him closely. Although Ah Feng was not as tall as Dong Xiaofang, his body was very close to Dong Xiaofang. This made Dong Xiaofang, who didn't like physical contact, very uncomfortable. After trying twice to turn around, Dong Xiaofang had to pass the ball to Enzyming, who stretched out his hand for the ball. Just now, Enzyming let Poplar Fruit score, and he was ready to return the ball. However, he was still the same as before. He couldn't squeeze past the seemingly thin but powerful Poplar Fruit. In the end, he reluctantly made a move. Under the interference of Poplar Fruit, he actually scored. Poplar Fruit looked at his finger gloomily. Just now, his middle finger touched the basketball and changed the original trajectory of the ball. The ball rolled into the basket so beautifully. Maybe if he didn't touch it, it wouldn't have been able to get in. But it was useless to be upset. This time, Poplar Fruit received the ball and began to charge like a madman in the half-court. Enrich, who was still standing on the ground, was forcefully squeezed past by Poplar Fruit. In the end, Poplar Fruit knocked away Deng Jian, who came up to fill in the defense and did a layup. The difference was reduced to 9 points again. Deng Jian rubbed his chest and looked at Enrich helplessly. He was 195 meters tall and weighed 120 kilograms, but he was easily knocked away by Poplar Fruit. Deng Jian looked as if nothing had happened after he landed, but Enrich's chest was in pain. Deng Jian took the ball, shook his head and said, "You're right. This is simply inhuman strength. I wonder who's stronger, Master Ji or him? It's probably enough. Master Ji doesn't give me as much pressure as him." Enrich finished and ran to the opposite side. Deng Jian still didn't attack. He passed the ball to Qiuzin. Qiuzin passed the ball to Zhongjie, but Poplar Fruit quickly stood nearby. As long as Zhongjie dared to attack, Poplar Fruit dared to give him a big hat. Under Poplar Fruit's covetous gaze, Zhongjie passed the ball again. Dong Xiaofang received the ball and shot, but he didn't make the shot. Poplar Fruit grabbed the rebound. This was a good opportunity to chase after points. It was too late to attack quickly. The opponent was at a disadvantage in the previous round. This time, they retreated very quickly. However, Poplar Fruit still attacked unreasonably with the ball. This time, he chose Dong Xiaofang as the breakthrough point. Of course, Dong Xiaofang couldn't defend against Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit didn't use any fancy moves. He directly accelerated and squeezed Dong Xiaofang away. Although Dong Xiaofang was afraid of physical contact, he wouldn't give up so easily. He gritted his teeth and followed behind Poplar Fruit, waiting for an opportunity to block him. Enrich appeared in front of Poplar Fruit. He stood firm, opened his hands, and blocked Poplar Fruit's attack route. Poplar Fruit wasn't afraid. He jumped toward Enrich. Enrich also jumped. His hands interfered in front of Poplar Fruit's eyes. In order to block Poplar Fruit, Dong Xiaofang also jumped high. His right hand reached above Poplar Fruit's head. Poplar Fruit raised his hand, but the ball was gone. Enrich and Dong Xiaofang were stunned. "Where's the ball?" "Right, where's the ball?" Wasn't Poplar Fruit holding it? No, the ball was now in the hands of our Feng, who was 2 meters behind Dong Xiaofang. Deng Jian saw it clearly. When Poplar Fruit jumped, his right hand passed the ball to his left hand. His right hand was still raised, but his left hand threw the ball out from under his crotch. Poplar Fruit knew that Dong Xiaofang also jumped, so the ball bounced under Dong Xiaofang's feet and fell into our Feng's hands. Although Deng Jian saw it clearly, he didn't have time to defend. He was too far away. Although it was a bit unbelievable for Feng to get the ball, he quickly reacted and decisively shot the ball. The ball steadily went into the basket. 22-15. The difference was reduced to 7 points. Poplar Fruit is really strong. Deng Jian finally recognized Poplar Fruit's strength. He knew that if he was the one handling the ball, he wouldn't be able to do it as well as Poplar Fruit. Yang Guo had caught on to Dong Xiaofang's mentality from the start and purposely lured him into a trap. This wasn't difficult, but the difficult part was Yang Guo's pass. How did he do it with his back facing them without looking? How was he able to pass through 2 people's crotches in the air? Furthermore, how was he able to pass to his teammate so accurately? Could it be that his vision was so wide? That's right. Poplar Fruit's vision was wider than most people. When he jumped, he saw our Feng's position. When he jumped, he had simulated the 3D image of the 4 of them in his mind. Then, he judged the angle and strength of his shot based on this. To be able to do it so accurately, it wasn't a fluke. The first half ended quickly, and there was a 5-minute break. Poplar Fruit and the others quickly went to the sidelines to drink water. As for the school team, Uncle Jin had asked someone to buy a box of water before entering. They didn't need to be told, as they also needed to take a break. At this time, the restless Zhang Yujie came up and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. She wiped the sweat off her hand, but she didn't care. She said loudly, "Little Poplar Fruit, you played well just now. I think highly of you. Good luck. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at her and didn't know what to say. He could only ask her, "Do you guys want to drink water?" After saying that, he handed 2 bottles of water to her. Zheng Yujie didn't hesitate. She took one bottle and pointed to the other bottle. "Open it for me." Poplar Fruit unscrewed the cap for her. She took a sip and said, "Well, not bad. The weather is too hot. I'm so thirsty sitting there." At this time, Uncle Jin came up and smiled. "Little Yang, this is?" Zheng Yujie said first, "I'm his boss. It's nice to meet everyone." Her aura overshadowed Poplar Fruit's, but if one didn't listen to what she said, one might think that she was declaring Poplar Fruit's sovereignty. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and said, "When did you become my boss?" Although he did use the word boss when he introduced Zheng Yujie to Song Jiwen, in his heart, he didn't think of her as a boss. And strictly speaking, they only had a temporary contractual relationship. She couldn't be considered a boss yet. Zheng Yujie was just a small interlude. 5 minutes passed quickly, and the second half began. Since the score was getting closer, Deng Jian did not plan to make a move. After half the court, he passed the ball to Enziming. This time, he mainly wanted to let his team members get some training. If he made a move and the score difference was too big, this game would be meaningless. Enziming practiced cross-dribbling in front of Poplar Fruit, but Poplar Fruit didn't move, so he didn't force Poplar Fruit and transferred the ball to Chiozine. Chiozine didn't feel much pressure facing Uncle Dao's defense. It was just that his shooting wasn't good. He missed a mid-range shot before, so he was just making passes for others. This time, Uncle Dao's defense was a little lax, and Chiozine seized the opportunity. He changed directions and bypassed Uncle Dao, and Uncle Jin, the last line of defense, was also firmly blocked by Zhong Jie. Seeing him drive in, he stood up easily and flipped his left wrist. The basketball flew to the basket. Got it. Chiozine was happy. At this time, his eyelids suddenly twitched. A huge shadow flew from the right side. Poplar Fruit got rid of Enziming and jumped high. Before the basketball flew to the highest point, Poplar Fruit slapped it away. Chiozine was shocked. Poplar Fruit could jump so high? In the past, except for a few professional players, only the captain had reached this height. But wasn't Poplar Fruit 10 centimeters shorter than the captain? The basketball was slapped out, but it didn't fly directly out of the court. Instead, it was picked up by Uncle Dao. Deng Jian shouted, "Return to defend." They immediately ran to their own half of the court, not giving Poplar Fruit a chance to make a quick attack. This was the tactical quality of Guangdong's top university team. Since this was the case, Poplar Fruit still held the ball and attacked. But this time, he encountered the opposite side's tight defense. Enziming followed Poplar Fruit closely, and Dong Xiaofang was waiting nearby. Chiozine switched to guard against Afeng, and Deng Jian stood between Song Jiwen and Uncle Dao. He was tall and had long arms. No matter who received the ball, he could defend in time. What to do? If he attacked, he was bound to be attacked by Enziming and Dong Xiaofang. If he passed the ball, his teammates had no chance to score, and it was very likely that they would lose the ball. Poplar Fruit was in a dilemma. Chapter 77. When Poplar Fruit was caught in a two-man pincer attack, his first thought was to look for his teammates. This could be considered his habit of thinking as a point guard in school. But what disappointed him was that his teammates, except for Afeng, were all standing straight in place. They didn't run to open up space. In fact, this couldn't be blamed on them. After all, they were all workers. Although they exercised regularly and their physical fitness didn't fall behind, they still couldn't be compared to those students who played basketball seriously. After playing for more than 10 minutes and running back and forth dozens of times, how could they not be tired? Looking at Uncle Dao and Uncle Jin, the two of them were already sweating profusely. Their hands were on their knees as they gasped for breath. It looked like they couldn't attack anymore. Even Song Jiwen, who had just left school for a little over a year, was sweating profusely. In order to conserve a bit of energy for defense, he did not hesitate to stand at a position close to the center of the three-point line at a 45-degree angle. Although our foe was still very energetic, he was followed closely by Qiu Xin like a sticky candy. He couldn't get rid of him. If he was given a one-on-one, he probably wouldn't stand a chance. Attack by himself? This wasn't easy. Currently, the opponent was in a two-man pincer attack. Even if he could really break through these two people, Zhong Jie would definitely make up for it. Then, as long as he held him back, he would be trapped in a three-man pincer attack. What should I do? Poplar Fruit dribbled the ball and stood outside the three-point line thinking. And Ximing, who was closest to him, stood inside the three-point line, about a step away from the free throw line. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He suddenly took a step back and jumped when he was still 2 steps away from the three-point line. And Ximing was shocked and rushed to jump over, but he was at least 1 meter away from Poplar Fruit. He stretched out his right hand, but he couldn't even reach Poplar Fruit's face. Poplar Fruit's wrist flicked gently. The basketball drew a beautiful parabola and went into the basket. Poplar Fruit's super long three-point shot. He could even enter like this. Dong Xiaofang felt a little incredulous. His three-point shot could be said to be the best among the 5 members of the school team. Even if it was him, if he suddenly shot while standing 2 steps away from the three-point line, he was sure that he would miss in such a hurry. Yang Guo, on the other hand, was very confident in his long-range three-point shot. He knew that his wrist strength was very strong. This distance wasn't difficult for him. His shooting sense was even more accurate than normal people's. It was as if he already knew what kind of angle and what kind of strength he should use when he took off. With this kind of talent, which was obtained through cultivation, Poplar Fruit was very confident that he could shoot the ball from any position within the center line without anyone guarding him. Deng Jian couldn't sit still any longer. Friendship was the most important thing, and winning or losing wasn't important. However, if he didn't do anything when he was leading by 11 points, then he would be playing with fire. This time, he didn't pass the ball. Instead, he held the ball and shook it a little. He pointed at Song Jiwen, then took a step to the left and easily hit the mid-range shot. The gap was once again widened to 6 points. Poplar Fruit had a headache because it was too easy for the opponent to score. The small district team's defense was full of holes. Even if he was a god, it was impossible for him to take care of every position. Every time he attacked, he had to put in a lot of effort. He had to fight a battle of wits and courage with a few of the opposing defenders. Even the physical confrontation was very intense. Only then could he barely score a few points. If this went on, if he missed even once, all his previous efforts would be wasted. However, even so, what could he do? In the end, the gap between their strength was too big. However, Poplar Fruit would not admit defeat so easily. Even if I'm the only one who can fight, I'll try my best to turn the tide. Even if you're an iron wall, I'll poke a big hole in it. Even if I lose, I'll let you see how good we are. In the face of a strong opponent, Poplar Fruit's fighting spirit was aroused again. Poplar Fruit's long three-pointer just now scared the opponent. As a result, Dong Xiaofang followed him when he received the ball from the front court, preventing him from suddenly making a long shot. However, this result was what Poplar Fruit wanted to see, or it was exactly what he expected. If both Ximing and Dong Xiaofang were within the three-point line, it would be difficult for Poplar Fruit to break through the two of them at the same time. However, now that Dong Xiaofang followed, the battle line was suddenly stretched. That meant that he fell into Poplar Fruit's trap. Just after half of the court, Poplar Fruit suddenly accelerated. Dong Xiaofang was caught off guard and was left behind. And Ximing was shocked and quickly went up to meet him. As Poplar Fruit rushed forward at high speed, he made a move to break through to the right. And Ximing judged that Poplar Fruit must have made a move. Under such inertia, it was impossible for an ordinary person to change direction. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and moved to the left. He was mentally prepared to use his body to meet Poplar Fruit, who could not stop in time. However, was Poplar Fruit an ordinary person? Of course not. Poplar Fruit was able to use his left leg as an axis and hook the ball back to him with his right hand at such a fast speed. Then, he turned his body and continued to accelerate to the backboard with this inertia. Although he said so much, Poplar Fruit's feints and turns happened in a flash. Almost no one on the court could react in time. Even Zhong Jie, who was standing under the basket, could only watch as Poplar Fruit's right hand hooked and made a successful layup. Deng Jian and the others, who were familiar with the NBA, only had one name left in their minds: Tony Parker. Parker, the little French sports car of the Spurs. Wasn't Yang Guo's breakthrough and turn for a layup Parker's signature move? Although it was a simple move, not many people could really learn it. This was because the physical talent required for this move was too high. Many people could only grasp the form after learning it. Even if they broke through to the basket, they could not avoid the fate of having to eat hot pot. However, Poplar Fruit's series of moves just now really stunned everyone on the school team. With this move, Poplar Fruit could look down on everyone on the school team, including the professional players. Of course, only people who understood Poplar Fruit's strength could understand. Zhang Yujie, who was on the sidelines, was clapping blindly. She had no idea why everyone was so excited. The school team's offense still avoided Poplar Fruit's defense. This time, Poplar Fruit changed to mark Deng Jian. However, Deng Jian was smart enough to pass the ball to Zhong Jie inside the three-point line. Zhong Jie easily avoided Uncle Jin and hooked the ball into the basket. There were still 4 minutes left, but this time, the community team was exhausted. Only Ah Feng followed Poplar Fruit to rush to the opponent's half of the court. Song Jiwen only ran to the center line. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth. He still had to do it himself. He got the ball and rushed up. This time, Deng Jian also marked him. He switched with Enzyming to see if Poplar Fruit was really that invincible. Deng Jian guarding against Poplar Fruit was definitely a wrong choice. Although Deng Jian was the strongest player on their team, his 1.95-meter height determined that his footsteps were far less agile than Dong Xiaofang's. Even Dong Xiaofang could not keep up with Poplar Fruit's footsteps. How could he guard against Poplar Fruit? Poplar Fruit only made 2 super-fast changes in direction, and Deng Jian gave up his position. Poplar Fruit easily bypassed him. Qiu Xin and Dong Xiaofang came from the left and right, but Poplar Fruit accelerated again. The moment they formed the encirclement, he suddenly sidestepped and passed through the middle. At that moment, Poplar Fruit's speed was like the wind. They could feel it, but they could not catch it. After the two, there was also Enzyming. Enzyming had returned to the free throw line when Deng Jian was entangled with Poplar Fruit. Seeing Poplar Fruit break through, he quickly filled in. Poplar Fruit was not afraid. He jumped to meet him, and Enzyming also jumped in the air. Poplar Fruit bent like a prawn, holding the basketball in his arms. He leaned on Enzyming's chest and turned his body in the air, bypassing Enzyming. Enzyming, of course, was not the school team's last line of defense. After Poplar Fruit bypassed him, a burly figure appeared in front of him. Zhong Jie. Zhong Jie did not jump high, but he was confident that he could stop Poplar Fruit, because Poplar Fruit jumped much earlier than him. But when he jumped to the highest point, he was surprised to find that Poplar Fruit was still rushing up. Not only that, Poplar Fruit's bent body suddenly straightened, like a spring, and rose a little higher. Then, Poplar Fruit raised the basketball with his right hand and pressed his left hand on Zhong Jie's shoulder. His whole body leaned back slightly like a fish diving to the top. Separated by Zhong Jie, his right hand heavily dunked the basketball into the basket. He hung on the basket with one hand and looked down at Zhong Jie, who staggered to stand firm on the ground, like a king looking down on the world. Was he judged by Yang Zyming? Zhong Jie's face was incredulous, but he was shocked beyond words. This kind of situation had never happened in the school team. He now felt powerless in front of Poplar Fruit. He was too strong. The one who felt it the most was Enzyming, who was lucky not to have been selected by Yang Guo. He had just jumped together with Yang Guo, but Yang Guo had bypassed him and was still able to do such a move. With such a tyrannical jump and body, Yang Guo was not even a professional footballer. Enzyming felt that his worldview had been challenged. Needless to say, the audience had already cheered when they saw Poplar Fruit's domineering dunk. The game in front was too oppressive. The community team did not have the strength to fight back at first, which made them very depressed. But Poplar Fruit not only slowly closed the gap, but also made such an explosive dunk that surpassed 5 people in a row. The onlookers could not stay calm. Not only did they applaud, but they also whistled. This time, even Zhang Yujie, who did not know how to appreciate poplar fruit, was shocked by his slam dunk. All of a sudden, the only thing left in her mind was the image of poplar fruit hanging high in the basket. It was really too manly. Zhang Yujie's eyes were now full of little stars. Her estrogen was secreted to the extreme. She could not wait to pull down the handsome and domineering man on the court immediately. Although the game still had more than 2 minutes to end, the result was already very obvious. Although poplar fruit was invincible when attacking, they could not stop the school team's attack at all. The two sides could only fight a tug of war. In the end, the gap remained at 4 points. In the next 2 defenses, they saw the power of the captain of Guangdong University of Technology school team. Maybe he was inspired by poplar fruit's dunk. With Enziming's help, Deng Jian completed a 2-handed split dunk with an alley-oop relay and a self-steal dunk. Both plays were very cool and bloody. Although it was not as wonderful as poplar fruit's slam dunk that surpassed 5 people in a row, the onlookers in Jinli community were not stingy with their applause. Although they lost the game, as said at the beginning, winning or losing was not important. What was important was that the game was played well, and that was enough. Basketball matters were settled on the basketball court. After the game, they became good friends again. After the game was over, the group of people, led by Uncle Jin, drove to a big restaurant near the community. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.